The story starts deep inside a place known as Noah's Great Labyrinth. It's actually the biggest dungeon in the whole world, tucked away in the city of Noah. People talk about the very bottom floor, a level that no one has ever managed to reach, mostly because a legendary treasure called the End of Dreams is supposed to be waiting there. Just about every adventurer around has their sights set on finding that secret stash, spending every single day diving deeper and deeper into the dark to find it. But this is really the story of one specific kid. It's the tale of how he actually makes it to the end of that dream. Things take a turn when his party gets totally caught off guard by a massive threat, as a giant one-eyed monster shows up and towers over them like they're nothing. Luke looks back with a confident smirk and tells the party to just leave everything to him, especially since the girl with the white hair reminds him that taking down this Cyclops is a huge step toward his dream, and she's totally on board. The tank jumps out in front and yells for his absolute hardening skill to kick in, just as the giant brings a massive fist down on the shield with enough force to shake the ground. The tank holds his ground and braces for the impact while the monster keeps the pressure on seeing an opening. The mage swings her staff and shouts for the monster's magic defense to drop, and black swirls of energy wrap around the giant to weaken it for the next big hit. She doesn't waste any time and calls out her Hell Flame spell to finish things off, sending a massive wave of fire straight at the monster until the whole place is covered in flames. But the giant isn't done yet, and it swings its huge club through the heat to keep the fight going. The giant Cyclops lets out a massive roar that shakes the whole room, and the tank can't believe it, yelling that the monster just swept away those flames like they were nothing. The mage is just as shocked, wondering how the giant is even able to move after an attack like that. But the boy steps in with a smirk and tells them he'll take over from here. He grabs his handles and gets ready to use his dual swords, and just like that, he moves in a blur, landing a bunch of crazy fast slashes all over the monster's body. The whole giant just falls apart into pieces behind him, completely wrecked in a single second, and the boy stands there looking totally chill while the dust starts to settle. A small black object from the monster drops onto the ground with a soft thud, so he reaches down to grab it, saying he finally got what he came for. The white-haired girl holds onto her gear with a huge smile. She says they finally made it this far. Just then, a hand reaches out and gives her a friendly pat on the shoulder, and Luke looks back with a smirk as the boy tells him he did a great job out there. The girl is totally hyped, calling out to Kyle while she cheers about the win. She can't get over it, saying it was seriously an incredible battle. As she walks, she makes sure to tell Kyle they only made it this far because of him. She really means it too, thanking him again as they start heading back. Luke is already thinking ahead, saying this win finally lets them become an S-rank party. He mentions all they have to do now is get that magic stone back to the guild, but the girl stops him, looking pretty worn out and saying they're exhausted from all the fighting. Alan starts losing his temper. He screams at the kid to stop wasting time and get them their drinks already, and Jack jumps in too, calling the kid a completely useless porter while they wait around. Kyle looks terrified. He starts apologizing to Alan and Jack, promising he'll get everything ready right away. He quickly gets to work pouring out the drinks into their mugs so Jack can finally take a seat. He has a drink and says it seriously hits the spot. Alan is in a way better mood now, laughing about how having fresh water in the middle of a dungeon is amazing. The light-haired girl is still being super sweet. She smiles and offers a cup to Anne, but Anne just looks totally annoyed as she grabs the drink from her. The vibe changes fast when Anne suddenly gets all clingy with Kyle. She asks him if they can keep going higher and says she'll follow him anywhere, which gives Kyle a weird look. He smirks and tells them all thanks for getting the party this far into the labyrinth. The leader tells the whole group they did a great job out there. Everyone's just taking a quick breather while Alan starts picking his nose and tells him that acting all nice isn't really like him. Anne just laughs it off and says they're only just getting started with this run, and she tells the leader, Luke, that he did a solid job supporting the team. She says he really worked hard for them. The white-haired girl watches them and just quietly says Kyle's name, while Jack walks behind them and grumbles about how Kyle is being way too soft on the porter. Another member says there's not much they can do about it since Kyle and the kid are childhood friends. Anne's eyes go wide as she notices something on Kyle's clothes. She's totally surprised and starts losing it, yelling that Kyle has blood all over his gear. Kyle doesn't even blink. He just tells her it's simple blood splatter and not to worry about it. Anne starts panicking over the mess and tells the porter to hold on. She says she's going to get him cleaned up right away. As she grabs his arm, the porter just mentions his laundry while she gets to work on the bloodstains. Suddenly, water bubbles start forming all over the dirty fabric. It's like a magical deep clean happening right in front of them. In a flash, every single drop of blood is gone and the sleeve looks brand new. Kyle just stands there looking like a total pro with his swords on his back, barely even noticing the shady comments. The leader smiles and thanks Luke for the help, saying that's just how he is, though Anne jokingly says that's not really the case. She gets this smug look on her face and adds that he's basically a dead weight in any other situation. But she does admit he's at least top tier when it comes to doing the chores. Alan stands there with his arms crossed, looking annoyed as he grumbles about how that wash skill is completely useless for actual fighting. Jack just laughs along, pointing out how insane the power gap is between a cleaning trick and a real skill like Kyle's dual wielding. Luke just looks down and gives a weak laugh, agreeing that the others are probably right about him, but Kyle snaps and tells them to shut it. He reminds the group that Luke is always there for them and yells that they should actually show some respect. He turns to Luke with a huge, friendly smile, telling the porter not to let the mean comments get to him at all. Luke is clearly touched, especially when Kyle tells him he's a really important friend. It seems like a nice moment, except that's when Kyle's face shifts into a scary, twisted grin. He lets out that he only felt that way until today, and Luke just stands there frozen. He can't even process the sudden, dark vibe coming off his friend. The rest of the group crowds around with shady looks, finally showing their true colors. Alan laughs and says it's about time Kyle stopped acting, while the girls just smirk along. Jack stares Luke down with a cold expression, making it clear that their little charade is officially over. Luke is shaking, just repeating the words about time and a charade like he can't wrap his head around it. He reaches out toward Kyle, asking what they're all talking about and hoping it's some kind of joke. But Kyle just bats his hand away hard, sending Luke stumbling back against the rough cave wall. The look on Kyle's face is pure ice, showing he's completely dropped the nice guy act for good. Luke stares at him with wide eyes, barely able to get Kyle's name out as the betrayal starts to sink in. Kyle just looks away with total disgust, telling Luke not to even think about touching him again. He brings up how it's been 3 long years since they left their tiny village for the city together, and it turns out he's just been waiting for the day he could stop pretending they were ever actually friends. Luke looks like his whole world is falling apart, asking what Kyle is even talking about right now. He asks if they weren't working together all this time just to make their shared dream finally come true. Kyle gets this nasty look on his face and repeats the word dream back at Luke like it's a joke. He mockingly reminds him of that old promise to make his dreams come true. He keeps that same trashy smirk while admitting he probably did say something like that a long time ago. Making it clear it was all a lie, Jack cuts in and tells Kyle they only dragged Luke along this far because Kyle promised them a show. Anne jumps in too, telling him to hurry up and give them a laugh. She looks totally over it and asks who even gives a damn about what this guy's dream is supposed to be. Kyle just laughs it off and tells them to chill out for a second. He grabs his sword and tells the whole group to listen up because he's about to spill everything. He tells them Luke's big plan is to become an S-rank adventurer just like his parents, the ones who got wrecked by the boss on the 50th floor. He keeps going with the insults, saying Luke actually thinks he's going to find the end of the dream treasure hidden deep in this dungeon, and Alan can't even hold it in, letting out a loud snort. Anne just stares at Luke like he's the biggest idiot she's ever seen. The whole group just loses it, screaming with laughter at the idea of a loser like him actually reaching the end of the dungeon. Luke is frozen in shock while they keep dogging him, asking what a pathetic laundry boy could possibly be thinking. Luke stands there totally crushed, asking why this is happening after they finally made it all the way to S-rank. He reminds Kyle about the promise to reach their dreams together, but then Kyle just gives him this really creepy, nasty look. He laughs in his face and asks if Luke actually thought they were doing this together, and suddenly Kyle reaches out and grabs a handful of Luke's hair, yanking his head back hard. He gets right in his face and asks if he's an idiot, telling him every single word was just a big lie. He keeps mocking him, asking if he really thought he'd become an S-rank adventurer like his parents, but then he calls him pitiful and says the plan was always to just dump him here and leave. Kyle shoves him to the floor like he's nothing. Luke's completely losing it, asking how he can be abandoned when he thought they were best friends. Kyle just laughs in his face, mocking the idea that they were ever actually best friends. He asks Luke if he has any clue how long he's been waiting for this day to finally come. Moving on, Kyle calls him an incompetent loser with a trash skill who only got by because of his parents. And he keeps going, telling Luke he has zero actual talent, but let his ego get way too big. Kyle gets close and tells Luke to listen up. Then Anne chimes in, looking like she's finally going to say how she really feels. She shouts that the truth is she's always absolutely hated him, which leaves Luke looking completely broken and terrified as his world ends. Kyle starts screaming with this twisted look, saying that's exactly the face he wanted to see, the look someone makes the second all their hope turns into total despair. Kyle laughs and says he sees Luke was waiting for this. While Alan and Anne join in, calling the scene a total masterpiece, Luke clenches his fist until it shakes, trying to convince himself this is all just a bad dream, and Kyle leans in with a smug look, telling Luke his parents were absolute idiots. saying he can't believe they actually got taken out by some random monsters. The white-haired girl stands there tensing up, looking like she's about to break. Kyle keeps going, saying that's what they get for going into deep levels when they were so weak, and mocks them for clearly not knowing their own limits, which leads to the whole group laughing as Kyle says those S-ranks weren't even actually good, leaving the girl staring at the ground, completely silent as she hits her limit until she finally snaps and lunges forward, screaming at them to stop messing around. Alan and Kyle just stand there watching her break, not looking bothered at all as the girl loses it and tries to swing at them, but Alan just shuts her down with his shield like it's nothing. While she's off balance, Jack steps up and gets his magic ready. He calls out a bind spell, and suddenly these magic chains wrap all around her, catching her completely off guard. She can't even move as the chains tighten up, and she just grunts in pain while trying to struggle, but it's no use. She ends up forced onto her knees right on a magic circle, and then the whole group starts laughing. Alan is really enjoying this, and Kyle just stands there with this smug look on his face. He towers over her and asks if she's finally starting to feel scared of him, but even though she's pinned down and shaking, she looks him in the eye and tells him he better take back what he said. Kyle just leans in close with a crazy, twisted smile, acting like he didn't even hear her. Kyle just leans in and taunts her, saying he can't hear a word she's saying while he starts to move. The girl yells out as blood suddenly sprays across the air, and she just lets out a choked sound. Tears start blurring her vision from the pain as Kyle stands over her with a twisted grin. He casually tells her that she really should have picked her words more carefully. The girl doesn't back down though, screaming for him to take it back. She demands he take back everything he just said, but Kyle doesn't even blink. He just gives her this cold, silent look for a second before he suddenly raises his sword high over his head. The girl is completely trapped and can't do anything but squeeze her eyes shut, waiting for the hit while crying, but then the blade stops right against her skin. She freezes up, staring in shock as it holds there. Kyle keeps the blade pressed against the girl's neck with a creepy smile, telling her he won't take back a word because he only told the truth. He leans in even closer to her face and calls out to Luke, pointing out that even her famous parents took 10 years to reach S-rank, but he did it in only 3. He looks totally unhinged while bragging about how much better he is, then he starts putting his sword away. He claims he's going to conquer Noah's Great Labyrinth, a feat that no one in history has ever pulled off just so he can be the one to find the end of the dream. He turns his back on them and Alan joins in, saying he's just glad to finally be rid of the dead weight. Kyle gives a casual wave and tells Luke goodbye, leaving Luke standing there completely speechless as Alan's voice echoes back, telling him they'll never see each other again. The whole party starts walking deeper into the cave, and Kyle tells Luke to go ahead and struggle all he wants in the little time he has left to live. The cave goes dead silent as the sounds of their footsteps fade away into the dark, and the girl is left slumped on the ground in chains, bleeding and broken, while Luke's discarded mask sits nearby. Anne just sits there in the dark with her hair over her face, not saying a word as she starts to wonder if she actually understood anything about what was going on. But then she hears a massive noise and looks back, totally caught off guard while still tied up. A giant, scaly foot slams down on the ground, kicking up dust. She can tell something huge is coming and panics, thinking she has to get away before she starts pulling at the chains, desperately yelling for them to just come undone. The monster is right on top of her now, hot breath and smoke steaming out of its fangs. Anne starts crying as she tries to break free, cursing her luck because she's still stuck. A massive soldier dragon in full armor stands over her and lets out a deafening roar, and she looks up in total shock, realizing it's a soldier dragon right before it attacks. The soldier dragon's eye focuses in cold and reptilian, just staring her down as Anne cowers on the ground. She can barely breathe and lets out a tiny gasp while she starts screaming for someone to help her because there's a monster right there. She flashes back to when they were kids. Kyle steps out in front of her and Luke, telling Luke to stand back. Kyle flashes a confident grin, telling them both to just leave everything to him. In the present, Anne is shaking and crying, barely able to say Kyle's name before she remembers how much Luke actually hated Kyle. He used to scream it right to his face. She looks down at the chains holding her, whispering to herself that Kyle is already dead. Moving back to the past, the two of them are standing in a cemetery, just kids alone. Anne is on her knees crying for her parents, while Kyle stands over her not saying a word. Anne is crying her eyes out, asking why their parents had to die while Kyle just stands there next to her, looking totally calm as the wind blows through. He tells her not to cry and calls her Luke, saying she isn't alone anymore. Standing over the Bonaparte family grave, he says they're going to finish what the old guys couldn't, leaving Anne completely stunned. She just stares at him and whispers his name, so Kyle flashes a huge smile and reaches out his hand, promising to make her dream come true. Back in the cave, the soldier dragon swings its giant axe right at her, but Anne just looks on, thinking about how much she really believed in him. She remembers the day they shook hands as kids, when he reached out and told her she wasn't alone, realizing that through everything, he's always been the one thing giving her hope. Anne's world just stops as she thinks about how all of it, everything she believed in, was just a lie, and the tears won't stop as she realizes she's completely alone again. Left with nothing but dark thoughts while the soldier dragon stands right over her, letting out a massive roar as it prepares to finish her. She closes her eyes and thinks of her dad and mom, seeing their faces one last time and wondering if she'll finally get to see them again just like this. But then out of nowhere, several black and white slashes tear right through the dragon's chest. Anne's eyes go wide. She can't even process what's happening right in front of her as the monster gets absolutely shredded by the speed of the attacks. And then a huge explosion of energy goes off, completely clearing out the whole scene. The dragon is completely gone, leaving nothing behind but a dark mana stone. Anne just stares at it, barely able to process the fact that she's actually alive, and as white and black feathers drift through the air, a calm voice asks if she's okay. She snaps out of her shock and looks up, her eyes still filled with tears. Standing right there is a mysterious woman with split black and white wings. The woman just watches her with this calm, quiet look that feels totally different, and can't even find the words to speak. She just stays frozen on the floor. She looks closer at her savior, her heart racing as she takes in every detail, thinking to herself about how this is the most beautiful woman she's ever seen. The woman asks her one more time if she's all right, leaving Anne to just stammer. Seraphina tells Anne to wait a moment as these glowing chains suddenly wrap around Anne, catching her completely off guard as they tighten up. Anne tries to thank her, but Seraphina just shakes her head and points out how bad Anne's leg is, saying she's going to heal it. Seraphina calls out a healing spell, and this bright light flashes between them, instantly closing the deep wound on Anne's leg and making it like new. Anne sits there on the ground trying to find the words to speak, while Seraphina just stares at her with this really intense, quiet look. The silence gets heavy and Anne starts to get a little nervous, especially when Seraphina leans in way too close, making Anne totally lose it. Seraphina speaks up again, starting off with a polite "excuse me," but she tells Anne that she has a certain vibe, then asks if she's a god. Anne starts sweating and immediately says no, she's definitely not one, but Seraphina leans in closer and says Anne smells exactly like a god. Anne explains her only skill is laundry, which leaves Seraphina confused since she remembers Alan laughing and calling her useless trash for it. Alan kept mocking her, saying she acts tough for someone so weak, as Anne just stood there taking the insults with a quiet little smile. Anne clarifies that her washing skill just removes dirt from things, and the two of them just sit there together in the quiet cave. Seraphina stands there looking completely puzzled, trying to wrap her head around something. She nervously reaches out and grabs a hand, sounding pretty hesitant as she speaks up. Looking Kyle right in the eyes, she asks if he'll actually wash away her sins. She just keeps staring at him, asking one more time if he'll really do that for her. Kyle is totally caught off guard, repeating the word sins like he can't believe what he's hearing. Seraphina looks down and confirms it, looking pretty sad as she starts to explain. She tells him she's a fallen angel who got kicked out of heaven for going against God's will. It turns out she's been trapped in that spot for thousands of years, completely unable to leave. And things are so bad that she can't even remember what her real name is anymore. Kyle just stands there in total silence, completely stunned by the heavy story she just dropped. Seraphina clasps her hands together and says she isn't looking for something big like going back to heaven. She just wants one thing, just one more chance to experience something simple. Looking up as she admits she really just wants to see the sun and the moon again. Kyle just stands there in total silence, his eyes wide as he takes in how small her wish actually is. He realizes she's just like him as she talks about being banished and left all alone. He clenches his fist tight, feeling frustrated because he wants to help but feels stuck. He tells her straight up that he really wants to repay her for saving his life, but he looks down, admitting he doesn't have the kind of power needed to pull off something that huge. As Seraphina listens, Kyle explains how he was just ditched by his team, people he thought were friends who were actually just faking it. He stands his ground, remembering how they all called him incompetent before throwing him away. Seraphina looks at Kyle with a soft expression, telling him that what his party did to him was just terrible. She goes on to say that she can actually feel a holy aura coming off him right now. Looking around the quiet dungeon, she mentions how this place is usually crawling with those pseudo-dragons they ran into earlier. It's not the kind of spot where people can just sit around and chat like they're doing. She looks him right in the eye and says his power is definitely something special. And because of that, Kyle suddenly snaps, looking down and asking her why she's saying all this. He turns his back to her and yells, asking how she can be so sure about him when she barely knows him. He looks up at the ceiling with a frustrated face, thinking about the power he's stuck with. He says his power has never been useful for anything at all, sounding completely fed up with himself. After a second, Kyle cools off and apologizes for raising his voice, but Serafina just starts to tell him not to worry about it. Serafina explains that she actually came all this way because she was drawn in by his aura. She looks right at him and says the magic power she's sensing from him is extraordinary, and it's because of that strength that she knows for a fact he can do it. She trails off for a second, saying she just can't help but feel Kyle's eyes go wide as he listens to her, looking totally stunned. He looks back at her and realizes her eyes remind him of someone from a long time ago. Suddenly he's back in a memory where a man tells him his eyes look just like his father's while patting him on the head, calling him Luke and promising him that he's going to be just fine. Coming back to reality, Kyle just stands there in total silence as the weight of the memory hits, so he looks down at the ground, clearly getting pretty emotional about his past. Luke clenches his fist tight as he looks at her, asking if she really believes in him that much. He takes a second to steady himself and decides that he's definitely going to give it a try. Even though he's nervous, Luke smiles and admits he's never actually washed anything other than physical dirt before, which gets a kind smile from Serafina. She tells him she's sure it'll work out and that she doesn't have any doubts about him. Luke looks her in the eye, getting serious for a moment as he asks her what her sin actually is. She looks down and explains that her sin was being arrogant enough to rebel against God himself. Luke doesn't hesitate. He just reaches out and grabs her hand with a firm grip so he can tell her that she's going to be fine. He tells himself to focus and picture the process as clearly as he can. With everything on the line, he concentrates all his energy and calls out his sin washing skill. A bright light starts to glow between them as the two stand there holding hands. Serafina looks at the glow and says the light is so beautiful. Luke just stands there, making him realize this is totally different from any washing he's done before. He's never felt anything like this, and honestly has no idea what's even happening right now. Everything feels like it's shifting, so feathers and bright lights start filling the air as the power takes over. Serafina stands in the middle of it all, her wings and hair starting to change, while Luke watches her hair and the color of her wings transform right in front of him. He's completely blown away. He says that it really is beautiful. He's just staring up at her because she looks like a total angel now with those massive white wings spread out. Her eyes snap open like she's just woken up from a long sleep, and as the feathers drift down, she says she finally remembers her name. Serafina looks up with tears in her eyes, telling him her name is actually Lucifer and thanking him. She's overwhelmed as she explains how she believed in him from the very second they met, while Luke just stares at her in total shock. His eyes are wide because they're standing there holding hands, and it finally clicks for both of them. Serafina feels like her power actually helps someone, and Luke realizes he really did save her. He's looking at her bright smile and thinking it's the best thing ever. He's just so glad he got to see her like this, so he lets out a soft smile of his own. Moving on, he tells her that he should be the one thanking her for all the help she's given him. He introduces himself as Luke Bonaparte and tells her how much it means that she had faith in him, and then Serafina clasps her hands together, saying that Luke's power is basically the power of God. She's convinced that only God could have erased the sin she was carrying around. Lucifer looks Luke right in the eye and tells him to just call her Lucifer from now on. She's serious about it, swearing her absolute loyalty to him on the spot while Kyle stands in the back totally blown away by what he's hearing. So Kyle starts blushing like crazy and tries to change the subject. He yells that anyway, they really need to focus on getting out of the dungeon right now. Lucifer just stares at him while Kyle starts walking off, acting like he knows the way, but he ends up tripping over a rock and yelling in pain. Lucifer just watches him struggle, and as Kyle rubs his head, he can't help but think about how Luke is such a kind and merciful person. Meanwhile, Lucifer gets a dark look on her face, wondering if there are any sinners out there even worse than her who dared to put Luke through such a rough time. She decides right then that she's going to find whoever they are and take them out for good. But then Kyle looks back at her with a worried face and asks if she's actually doing okay or if something is bothering her, since she looks pretty intense. But Lucifer just shakes it off and says it's nothing at all. As they keep moving through the cave, Kyle mentions how he really wants to learn a bit more about Lucifer, so he just comes out and asks if it's true she got kicked out of heaven for rebelling against God. Lucifer looks pretty caught off guard, but she looks down and admits it's true, saying she still feels bad about how dumb she was being back then. Kyle follows up by asking what she actually did to rebel, which makes her hesitate for a second, before she finally explains that she basically just ignored a direct order from God to show respect to a certain human. She looks totally ashamed while explaining how she just completely blew that person off, and the two of them just stand there while the silence gets a little awkward. Kyle stares at her for a second before asking if that's seriously all she did to get banished, but Lucifer just nods, acting like being that arrogant and going against God's will was the worst crime ever. Kyle can't take it anymore and gets right in her face, yelling that what she did isn't even a real rebellion. Lucifer is completely stunned and tries to find the words to respond, so Luke looks up and asks her what exactly happened in heaven after she was cast out. Lucifer explains that her friends got so mad about her banishment they actually started a rebellion, but she just trails off, sounding like she doesn't know how to feel about it. Luke gets emotional and yells that this proves she didn't actually do anything wrong, and he adds that it's totally normal to have a couple of people you just can't stand. He mentions that even though he's an adventurer doing his best, he's got his own issues, and Lucifer just quietly agrees as she listens to him talk. She mentions she spent thousands of years thinking she was just being an idiot, confessing she's been blaming herself for ages, right as they hit the 77th floor where slimes are starting to pop up everywhere. Lucifer thinks to herself how Lord Luke is different, feeling touched that he would say such nice things to someone like her. The two of them keep moving through the dungeon, and Lucifer mentions how they've managed to come a long way. But as they reach the next section, Luke starts talking about the stairs leading up from where they are. He stops and looks back, asking Lusa if she's doing okay, but then he sees her face and completely freezes up from what he sees. Luke quietly says her name when he realizes Lucifer has actual tears in her eyes, and she tries to hide her face, stumbling over her words while she says she's sorry for getting emotional. Luke doesn't just stand there, he reaches out and grabs her hand tightly to make sure she knows everything is going to be all right. He looks her in the eye and tells her that her sin should be totally gone by now and gives her a big grin, asking if that helps her feel a little less anxious about things. Luke looks at her and gently asks her to stop crying, and Lucifer nods, saying that just having Luke hold her hand like this makes her feel way more relaxed and reassured than she expected. Luke just gives her a kind look, letting the moment sink in for a bit. He tells her it makes sense since she's been alone for so long and jokes about how petty God is for the situation, though she thinks that's a bit mean. Luke gets fired up and says it's time to keep moving, so Lucifer gives him a huge smile and agrees they should head out. The two of them start walking up the stone stairs together, leaving the lower levels behind as the action heats up on the 37th floor. Alan stands over a fresh blood splatter on the wall, finishing off another monster. He looks pretty annoyed and mentions how there seem to be way more monsters than usual. Jack looks over and asks if he really thinks so since everything seems pretty normal to him, but Anne chimes in, suggesting it probably just feels tougher because their party size is smaller now. Alan stares off for a second and decides it's probably just his imagination. Then Jack starts laughing, asking the group if they saw the stupid look on that porter's face. Anne can barely contain herself, saying that just thinking about the guy makes her crack up. They keep joking around, saying the guy is probably sitting in some monster's stomach by now, while Alan says the guy had the worst luck ever for ending up with a trash skill like washing. He then turns to Kyle and asks if he was the one who actually went to the church with him. Kyle keeps going, saying that even after Luke found out he had the washing skill, he just kept smiling like a total idiot. He starts laughing so hard he can barely breathe, thinking about how pathetic the whole situation was, the way things work in this world. Everything is decided for a person the moment they turn 7. That's the day every kid gets a special blessing from God known as a skill. And for Kyle it was the start of something big since he ended up with the dual-wielding skill. But Luke got the short end of the stick with a useless power like washing that basically does nothing. Kyle is fully convinced that he's the one God actually picked to be a hero. He stops talking for a second, just standing there with a smug look. He lets out a creepy grin, telling himself that in this world, having power is the only thing that counts. Meanwhile, Luke and Serafina make it to the 4th floor, where the fog is getting so thick it's hard to see. Serafina warns Luke that they can't see where monsters might jump out from, making him take a slow, deep breath to keep his head in the game despite the thick fog. But then she casually mentions that there aren't any monsters nearby even trying to attack them. Luke is floored that she even has detection skills on top of everything else. He's starting to see how powerful Lucifer really is, though he just stammers out a quick thanks when she asks what's up. Moving on, Luke points out that the fog is still way too thick to figure out which way to go, and realizes they've got to do something about the visibility if they want to get anywhere at all. Luke stands there for a second as a crazy idea suddenly pops into his head. He starts wondering what would actually happen if he used his wash skill on the mist itself. Serafina just watches him, asking if he's okay since he's just standing there staring into the white. Luke closes his eyes and focuses all his energy on the air around them. Calling out Mist Wash, a huge wave of energy shoots out from him, instantly blowing back the heavy fog and leaving Serafina standing there with her mouth wide open in total shock. The thick mist gets pushed out of the way, showing the entrance to a dark cave that was hidden before, and now the two of them just stand there staring at the path ahead. Luke looks down at his hands with wide eyes, barely able to whisper that he actually did it. Serafina watches him, thinking to herself about how much power it took to do that. She's never seen anyone use a skill to change the environment like that before. And Luke looks around, noticing the fog cleared for 10 meters and wondering what else he can do. He realizes that even though he only wanted to see better, this skill is way stronger than he thought. Luke clenches his fist as he looks at the path he just cleared. He starts wondering if he has enough power to wash the fog off this whole floor. He closes his eyes to focus his energy again, whispering the words fog wash to see what happens next. He stands there in the middle of the cave waiting for a big flash, but everything stays exactly the same. Luke's eyes go wide and he starts to freak out a little. He can't believe the skill just failed him. He looks down at his hands and says that nothing is happening, while Seraphina just stands there behind him watching. He's totally confused and starts wondering why it's not working, especially since nothing about the area has changed since the last time he used it. He puts a hand to his chin and tries to think, wondering if there's some hidden reason why the skill won't activate now. He tells himself to slow down and think back. He needs to remember exactly how his washing skills worked in the past. He goes over the list of things he's cleaned before, like sin and that thick mist, trying to find a pattern. But then Seraphina finally speaks up and calls his name. She looks pretty worried while she watches him overthink the whole situation. Luke snaps out of his head and tells Lucifer not to worry about his earlier freak out. He looks like he's finally got a plan, and says he just wants to try out a few different things to see what works. Lucifer just giggles and says she understands, standing there with her wings out while watching him. Before she can say anything else, Luke reaches out and grabs both of her hands. It's a total surprise that leaves her staring at him with wide eyes, completely frozen in the moment as he gets right in her face and shouts that he's finally figured it out, calling her by her name. Lucifer starts blushing like crazy and stammers out his name. She's clearly losing her cool because Luke just lets go and runs off, yelling for her to keep her eyes on him as he gets into position. He stops in the middle of the floor and whispers the words mist wash, focusing all his energy. He stands there with his arms wide open, ready to let his power sweep through the entire cave. Luke lets out a massive burst of energy that fills the entire cave. The power is so intense that Lucifer can't do anything but stare in total shock while the ground shakes. As the light starts to fade, Luke's hand reaches through the thinning mist. The thick fog is completely gone, revealing a giant, empty cavern that was hidden before. Luke is grinning like he just won the lottery, but Lucifer is still trying to process everything, finally finding her voice to tell him how crazy the whole situation is. He just laughs and explains that he decided to try washing the fog off the entire floor, a move that leaves her calling it amazing while wondering how he even managed to do it. Luke looks down at his hand and casually mentions he got the idea from seeing her beautiful hands. That completely breaks her brain. She just stands there blushing and totally confused by what he said. Lucifer explains that the skill only kicks in once you actually touch the target, which is why she points out that Luke was holding her hand when he washed away those sins earlier. She goes on to say it didn't work before simply because he wasn't physically touching the fog. Luke reaches out and pats her head. Lucifer is left thinking about how crazy it is that a basic wash skill can do something this huge. She stares off, wondering if this power actually has way more potential than anyone ever realized. The thought triggers a memory of someone saying things are just like they used to be, and suddenly a voice asks Luke what's wrong. Back in the past, Luke's dad notices he looks gloomy and asks if something is on his mind. Young Luke looks like he's about to cry, telling his dad that he really wanted to be an adventurer just like him, but he's completely crushed because he only got the laundry skill. He says there's no way he can fight with that. His dad just grins and tells Luke to listen up, getting ready to tell him something important. Luke's dad starts explaining that every skill is actually a gift from God, and he's sure that God picks out the perfect one for each person. He tells Luke that the skill belongs to him and him alone, reaching out a hand as he says to believe in his own strength. While patting his head, the dad promises that if he does that, his skill will definitely respond to him one day. Young Luke just stares up at his father, his eyes wide with a new sense of hope. Back in the present, Luke remembers his dad saying he could be the strongest if he just believes, so he clenches his fist against his chest and sends a silent thank you to his father. With the fog finally gone, Luke suggests they should head straight for the next floor since they can see now, but Lucifer speaks up from behind and asks Lord Luke to wait a second. Lucifer spots something in the distance and says their target finally showed up, which brings a pair of massive, sharp legs slamming down onto the hard ground. A huge A-rank snake spider stands right in front of them, looking ready to kill. While Lucifer stays completely calm, Luke lets out a groan as the pressure hits him. He looks at the beast and says he can't believe they ran into such a monster. Knowing the stakes, Luke tells himself he has to fight or he'll definitely be killed, but he starts doubting if he can really do anything since his only skill is wash. Just then, his father's voice plays in his head, telling him to believe in his own strength. Luke remembers how he washed away sins and cleared that thick fog earlier, and he starts thinking that maybe he can use his skill to help him in actual combat too. Luke's father reaches into his hair and tells the kid he wants him to have something. leaving Luke staring at his palm as his dad explains it's a hair tie that his mom braided for him. He tells Luke to keep it as a good luck charm, and with a warm smile he says he's sure it'll give Luke strength when he needs it most. Back in the present, Luke looks at his hand with a stunned expression. He looks down at the braided tie in his hand and calls out to his mom and dad. He asks them to lend him their strength for what's coming next. Lucifer tells Luke to step back and let her handle the monster, but Luke just tells her no. He says he has to get stronger and starts wrapping the braided tie around his wrist, pulling his hair back. He says he can't afford to stop here if he's ever going to make it. Luke speaks up and asks if she can leave this fight to him. Seraphina looks a bit surprised, but then she smiles and says she understands, so Luke tells her thanks as he turns his back to face the threat head-on. He takes a second to adjust his gear and get his head in the game. Luke's eyes are locked in. He's got that look like he's ready for anything. The snake spider screeches, and Luke shouts that he's going all out before the two of them face off in the middle of the dark, web-covered cave. Luke keeps his focus on the snake spider, reminding himself to watch out for the venom and the webs while clenching his fist, thinking about his training. The monster lunges forward, and Luke knows he has to watch every single move. Luke barely reacts in time as the snake spider's massive leg sweeps through the air. Venom drips from the monster's fangs and sizzles against the ground, showing just how dangerous this thing really is. Luke thinks to himself that this power is way more than he expected, so he leaps back to get some distance while Seraphina watches from the sidelines. She stays completely silent, just keeping her eyes on the fight as Luke grits his teeth. He knows that just running away isn't going to solve anything, and he realizes he needs to find a way to stop its movements. He looks around and notices the spiderwebs are strung up all over the cave, giving him a sudden idea that makes his eyes go wide. Luke stands his ground and yells for the monster to come and get him. The snake spider's massive eye narrows, focusing in on its prey as Luke starts sprinting across the cave floor, drawing the monster's attention, and with a big grin, he yells for it to take a good shot since he's standing right there. Seraphina watches him closely, whispering his name as she tries to figure out why he'd do something so risky, wondering if he's actually making himself a target on purpose. Luke keeps the pressure on, mockingly asking the beast if it's already done, which baits the creature right into the thickest part of the sticky webbing, until it's completely stuck. The massive monster is totally frozen in place, and Luke just laughs, asking how it feels to get caught in its own trap. Seraphina finally gets it, realizing this was his plan from the very start. Seraphina realizes Luke played the decoy perfectly, getting the beast's legs tangled in the threads, giving him a chance to pull back while the monster's attack options are totally cut off. She sees its legs are sealed tight, thinking they finally have a shot at using Luke's wash skill, but the snake spider isn't done yet, letting out a screech that echoes through the cave. The sound is so loud it catches Luke off guard, forcing him to cover his ears as a swarm of tiny spiderlings starts pouring out of the monster to surround him. Luke realizes too late that the beast can summon help, putting him in a bad spot, and even with its lower body stuck, the snake half rears back for one more strike. The neck swings around like a giant whip, nearly crushing Luke as he ducks, barely avoiding the hit, though the sheer force of it clearly has him reeling. The impact from the monster's hit lands with a massive boom. Seraphina screams out for Luke, asking if he's doing okay while he's stuck on the ground, looking pretty roughed up. Luke tells her he's fine and that he only took a small hit, trying to play it cool despite the bruises. He tells her not to worry and just to keep an eye on him while he gets back to work. Seraphina looks relieved and gives him a quick nod, trusting him to handle things. Luke decides he's got to clear out the baby spiders first, so he launches a fireball right into the middle of them. The flames burst across the floor, scattering the little monsters everywhere. But Luke realizes a basic spell just isn't enough to wipe out a swarm this big, so he starts charging up more fire in both hands to really bring the heat. He locks in with a look of pure focus, ready to end this. Luke lets out a shout, calling out his fireball barrage as he launches a massive wave of fire. The flames tear across the ground, completely roasting the swarm of small spiders. Luke catches his breath and notes that he managed to hold off the spiderlings, but he knows the real fight is just starting. The massive snake spider towers over him, looking way more dangerous up close. Luke looks up in shock and points at the beast, shouting that he finally found the right one. The monster lets out a massive hiss, showing off its fangs right in his face. Luke is actually surprised that his plan is working so well, and he realizes this is his best chance to finish it. The giant snake head lunges forward with its mouth wide open, nearly catching him, but then a memory of his father shows up, calling out his name and giving him a bit of a push. As his father's voice tells him to believe in his own strength, Luke moves fast to dodge the strike. Luke's father's voice rings out in his mind, telling him that his skill will definitely respond to him if he believes. Luke leans in with everything he's got, desperately hoping that this move is going to be enough to turn things around. He reaches his hand out toward the massive beast, Focusing every bit of his mana into his palm, Luke yells out the name of his move, Magic Body Laundry, throwing the spell right at the monster's face. The magic hits the snake spider dead on, and a massive explosion of water and steam completely wraps around the monster. The spell starts working instantly, scrubbing and washing away at the creature's scales with insane pressure. Luke keeps the pressure up, screaming at the top of his lungs while he drains the very last of his energy. But then a dark memory of Kyle shows up, laughing and calling Luke a piece of trash with a total joke of a skill. Kyle's mean face stays in his head, saying it's good riddance now that the dead weight is finally gone, and Luke can't help but feel that old sting again, his eyes welling up with tears as he struggles to hold his ground. In his mind, Luke hears his father's voice telling him that out of everyone in the world, he's the one who is going to keep getting stronger as time goes on. Luke stands alone in the middle of the cave. The monster is finally down and he tells himself that he actually did it, calling out to his dad while tears of relief hit. He just slumps over on the ground, completely spent, when he hears footsteps coming. Lucifer comes running over as fast as she can, yelling out for Lord Luke while she grabs his hands, losing it over how much power he just showed off. Luke keeps his head down, sounding pretty serious when he calls her name. He starts to ask her if a guy like him can really reach his goal and actually conquer this dungeon, leaving Lucifer just staring at him in total silence. Lucifer gives him a warm smile and says that of course he can do it, adding that she's totally sure conquering this place is something only Lord Luke can pull off. She pulls him into a tight hug and tells him there's really nothing he can't do. Luke's eyes well up with tears as he hears her say those things, and he just agrees with her, quietly thanking Lucifer for being there for him. Lucifer looks at him calmly and says there is nothing to worry about anymore, promising that from now on she is always going to be right by his side. The two of them just sit there on the floor of the cave for a while. Everything finally goes quiet as the mess from the big fight settles down. Then Luke stands up and rubs his head, feeling a bit awkward about crying earlier. Luke finally gets his head on straight and thanks Lucifer for helping him calm down, even though she makes things awkward again by happily telling him he's welcome to use her chest as a pillow anytime. Luke just laughs it off and tells her he's actually feeling pretty worn out after everything, suggesting they should probably find a place to pull over and take a break soon. As they walk, Lucifer mentions that his whole personality seems to shift whenever he starts a fight. Luke stops pouring his drink and looks at her, sounding surprised as he asks if he really changes, so she clarifies that it's everything from the way he speaks to the expressions on his face. She goes on to say that in those moments, he really does seem like a completely different person. Luke takes a second to process that and admits he hasn't noticed his behavior changing at all, but he looks down with a smile and explains it's probably because he's always wanted to be strong like his dad. Lucifer smiles to herself, wondering if Luke's father is the reason he acts so differently when things get serious, and she asks him if his dad is a big role model for him. Luke looks back at her and tells her that he's really proud of both his mom and his dad. Moving on, Luke pours a drink and hands it over to her. She thanks him and says she'll take it, then Lucifer tips the cup back to take a sip, but the second the liquid hits her tongue she completely freezes up. She looks totally shocked by whatever is in that cup, so she asks him what exactly she's drinking. Anne realizes it's just plain water, and Luke explains he just picked up some basic fire and water magic so the group could have lights and stay hydrated, but Lucifer can't even find the words. She's staring at him like he's crazy, because she can feel a ridiculous amount of power coming from what was supposed to be a simple spell. Lucifer is completely blown away, thinking she has never felt holy magic this powerful in her life. She can barely process it, just repeating the word holy under her breath while she realizes that Luke's magic is actually on a terrifyingly high level. Looking at her cup, Lucifer says it's only natural for the water to feel like this since the density of magic is so high. She notices the water is literally a buff potion that recovers mana and boosts physical strength, which is honestly just extraordinary to her. Anne speaks up from the back, saying she drinks this stuff all the time and she always figured it was just normal water. Lucifer stands there with her wings out, totally stunned, but Anne keeps going, mentioning that the water isn't even the only crazy thing happening. She explains that thanks to the holy magic Luke is giving off, the monsters in the dungeon are actually staying away from them. Anne looks a bit confused, saying she thought she was always this strong, while Lucifer just stares at her. Lucifer can't believe her eyes. She's staring at Luke in total shock because he handles these insane powers like they're absolutely nothing. And Anne just smiles at him, telling Luke that he really is something else. She starts to say that he's still completely oblivious. She asks him if he seriously doesn't get how crazy his power level is, but before he can even answer, a snake spider lunges out of the shadows. The monster is moving fast, snapping its jaws, and Luke can't believe there are still more of these things coming at them. He stands his ground with a flame ready in his hand while the group tries to make a run for the exit. Luke mentions they're so close to the stairs for the upper level, And as they move, he starts thinking about what Lucifer told him earlier. It's finally starting to click for him that even his most basic spells are actually dealing real damage to these high-rank monsters. He gets this serious look on his face, realizing that if his power really does have holy magic in it, even if he doesn't get the details, it changes everything, so he prepares to test a theory. He wonders what would happen to these creatures if he just used his wash skill to scrub away all their impurities. Anne sees the threat and screams for Luke to look out because the monster is closing in fast. The snake spider lunges forward with its massive jaws wide open, ready to tear into them. Luke jumps back just in time to avoid the strike. He's surprised by how quick the thing is, so he decides it's time to test his idea. He starts by focusing his power into a ball of water, thinking about how this simple magic can wash away all the impurities inside a creature. He calls out his water ball wash spell and realizes that if this actually works, he'll basically be creating a huge burst of holy magic right in front of him. He leaps high into the air, the glowing sphere of water ready in his hand, and lines up his shot while he puts every bit of energy he has into the throw. He yells for the spell to hit its mark and the water ball connects clean. The whole area lights up as the monster gets blasted by the power, leaving Luke to land back on the ground, totally stunned by the level of destruction he just caused. Seraphina is completely blown away by the power she just saw. She can't believe her eyes, saying it's amazing. Luke looks at the smoke where the monster was, realizing this is the real power of his wash skill, and he looks at his hand, thinking about how he always felt useless with a skill like this. He really believed it was just a trash ability since that's what everyone always told him. Luke reaches out with a confident look, thinking that with this power, he's finally sure he can reach the end of his dream. He clenches his fist tight, ready to go again. He tells himself he's starting over from here, and Seraphina rushes over to ask if he's doing okay. Luke turns back to look at her, still a bit focused on what happened, but he gives her a big smile and says he never thought he could actually fight like this using wash. Seraphina starts to say that it's about way more than just the skill itself. She tells him it's his fire and water magic, his ability to read the enemy, and how he uses his skills that really matters. Seraphina looks at Luke with so much respect, telling him that everything happening now is just the result of all his hard work. Luke's eyes go wide, and he's completely stunned to hear her say that. Like he can't quite take it in at first, but he eventually nods and agrees she's right, finally realizing that all the time he spent struggling wasn't for nothing. With a massive smile on his face, he thanks her and says he's just really glad she's there with him, which makes Seraphina look even happier as she thanks him for accepting her for who she's been this whole time. The moment passes and Luke looks around, seeing the coast is clear and suggesting they finally get out of there. He mentions that the next stop should be the town of Noah to get some gear and supplies, but then a sudden thought hits him, and he stops right in his tracks while looking over at his companion, and he starts wondering what people are going to think when a literal angel just walks onto the surface. Knowing her showing up is probably going to cause a huge scene and freak everyone out in the entire town. Luke points out that things would get even worse if they bumped into another person. While they're still in the dungeon, knowing that someone seeing an angel would definitely spark some massive rumors that they really don't need right now. Lucifer notices how stressed he's getting and asks him what's wrong, pointing out that he looks way too pale, but Luke just clutches his head in a panic, asking her what they're supposed to do because this whole situation is a total disaster. He starts freaking out about what humans would actually do if they found a rare species like an angel out in the open, and warns her that the absolute worst-case scenario is people capturing her just to sell her off to the highest bidder. Lucifer's eyes go wide and she repeats the word sold, sounding completely shocked that anyone would even think of doing that, while Luke continues to spiral, grabbing his hair and saying he just really wants to get her to the surface safely. He keeps yelling about how he has no idea what to do, while Lucifer just stands there silently watching him lose his mind. Finally, she speaks up and says it's only a problem if people find out she's an angel, so they should just get moving. Luke just stands there looking completely lost after hearing Lucifer's suggestion, and before he can even process it, she takes a quiet breath to start her transformation. Suddenly, her massive white wings start glowing and shedding feathers everywhere. It's like they're just dissolving into light, completely changing her appearance while Luke watches in silence as she stands in the middle of a literal circle of feathers, now totally wingless. She looks up at him with a calm smile and asks if this new look works for them, but Luke is just losing it, staring at her with his mouth hanging open in total shock. He starts flailing his arms and screaming, asking her if wings aren't supposed to be the most important thing an angel has, and then he keeps panicking, pointing out that she won't be able to return to heaven without them. But Lucifer just brushes it off like it's nothing, telling him heaven is a joke because she's already sworn her loyalty to him. Lucifer gives him this soft smile and says she doesn't care about losing her wings if it means they stay together, and Luke just stares at her, barely able to even say her name because he's so caught off guard by what she just admitted. He's completely frozen. He just sits there wondering if he actually heard her right or if he's losing his mind. While Luke is dealing with that bombshell, the scene shifts way down to the 34th floor where a guy with a mohawk is absolutely wrecking monsters, slicing through them like they're nothing at all. He starts bragging about how his group, the Fire Sword Party, finds these kinds of fights to be a total piece of cake. The leader calls out for everyone to move to the next floor, leaving their young porter, Ash, struggling in the back. Ash just stands there in silence. Her face is hidden under a big hood while she holds onto the straps of her massive pack. The mohawk guy looks back and gets instantly annoyed, yelling at Ash to find out what's taking her so long, but he doesn't even wait for an answer, just barking at her to hurry the hell up and keep following the group. The mohawk leader turns back and calls Ash a skillless freak, then warns her that if she can't handle the bags, he's leaving her behind. Ash doesn't say a word, she just focuses on this massive wave of magical power coming from somewhere close by. And as she watches her party walk away, she realizes there is absolutely no mistaking what she is feeling right now. She keeps pace with the group, sensing that whatever is giving off that energy is getting closer to them with every step. So Ash just hides a little smile under her hood while walking along. She looks back one more time, whispering to herself that she finally found who she was looking for this whole time. The story moves ahead to the deep halls of the 35th floor. Luke and Lucifer are walking together, and Luke checks in to see if she's doing okay now that they've finally made it this far. Lucifer gives him a bright smile and tells him she's doing great and isn't having any issues at all with the climb. Luke lets out a sigh of relief and mentions that once they hit the 28th floor, there's a town they can finally rest in. Luke's mention of a town catches Lucifer off guard, and she asks if a place like that really exists inside the dungeon while Luke tells her it's actually a really nice spot. He explains that he's planning on buying some new gear and armor once they arrive, but Lucifer watches him walk and thinks his movements are already perfect. She gets all worked up and shouts that he doesn't need any of that extra stuff at all. Luke just laughs and tells her he appreciates the thought. But just then, a random group of guys up ahead spots them and the guy in the hood smirks, pointing out to his crew that they aren't the only adventurers around here. The Mohawk leader stands there with a shady look on his face, just watching them approach. Another guy in the group stares at Luke, noticing his silver hair and blue eyes and realizing he knows exactly who this is, so Luke stops and realizes they've run into other people. While Lucifer immediately goes on high alert and tells Luke he needs to be careful around these guys. Ash hides her face under her hood, looking down as she says there's a bit of a troublesome person in that group, while the story shifts over to Kyle's dual-wielding party, who are all smiles because they've finally arrived at their destination. They've made it to a city that was built by adventurers specifically for other adventurers to use, and this place is known as Kataru, located way down on the 28th floor of the dungeon. The group heads over to a massive building known as Roa's Inn to settle in for a bit. A hand slams a massive dark crystal down onto the counter with a heavy thud, catching the attention of everyone nearby. A guy in the lobby realizes who just walked in and calls out that it's the dual wielder as his partner stares in disbelief, asking what's up with that insanely huge magic stone they just brought in. The tank from Kyle's group just smirks at them, bragging that the crystal they're looking at came from a cyclops. He narrows his eyes and starts to explain exactly what having a stone like this really means. The tank from Kyle's group stares down the other adventurers, asking if they realize the weight of what they're seeing. The guys in the lobby look totally shaken, sweating as the pressure of the dual-wield party's presence starts to sink in and someone in the crowd lets out a stressed groan. Their hand grips their leg in a tight fist, clearly frustrated by the massive gap in power. Just then, a guy in the lobby loses it and screams at the top of his lungs that they actually did it. The news starts to spread through the room like wildfire, while the crowd is in total shock, loudly asking if it's true that they actually beat the 45th floor boss. One guy throws his hands up in the air, caught up in the hype of seeing such a high-level party in person. Everyone starts shouting that this has to be the fastest S-rank ever achieved. Kyle just stands there with a confident smirk, soaking in the praise as people yell that they've just witnessed a brand new record being set. A calm voice from behind the counter cuts through the noise, offering a formal congratulations to the members of Dual Wield. The woman behind the desk is revealed to be the landlady of the inn, a foxkin named Rona who used to be a legendary S-rank adventurer herself. Rona gives them a welcoming look and says she'll personally show them to the absolute best room they have available. Kyle tells her that sounds perfect, but the dark-haired mage gets a bit too excited, shouting for Rona to bring some girls up to the room as well. Anne immediately snaps at her, telling her to stop going way overboard with the requests. Rona just gives a playful smile, resting her hand on her chin as she tells them that it won't be a problem at all. Rona's eyes widen as she takes a closer look at the group. clearly catching onto something she didn't notice before, and she questions if they really managed everything as just a party of 4. The whole group stands there looking totally unfazed, while Kyle just gives a smug look and asks if she has some kind of problem with their small team size. Rona quickly looks down and says no, keeping her thoughts to herself as she gathers her composure. She leads them into a high-end VIP suite, telling them to follow her right this way into the luxury room. As soon as they get inside, Alan grabs a wooden barrel and starts chugging the alcohol like it's water. While Kyle and Anne kick back on the fancy couch, Anne politely thanks the maid who's busy pouring them drinks, and Kyle looks over his shoulder as Alan suddenly yells his name from the other side of the room. Alan's already half drunk and laughing, telling Kyle he really needs to start drinking more too. The rest of the party starts partying with the girls Rona brought in, and Alan shouts that they deserve to go all out since it's not every day they get to celebrate a win this huge. One of the girls at the table yells at the rest of the group to keep the noise down, but Kyle just leans back with a smug look, telling everyone not to mind him and to just keep enjoying the party. Looking at them, Kyle secretly thinks they're all just a bunch of incompetent fools who only made it this far by living off his scraps. Alan keeps chugging from a wooden barrel, bragging that now their S-rank real elite adventurers are going to be begging to join them. While Alan celebrates, Kyle's dark thoughts continue. He's already planning to dump his current team the second those better adventurers show up. One of the girls leans in close to Kyle's ear, whispering his name to get his attention away from the group. She tells him to just forget about those idiots and asks what he's doing later tonight. But Kyle doesn't seem to care until he suddenly freezes. Something across the room catches his eye and leaves him looking completely shocked. Standing right there is a young maid with long braids, holding a bottle of wine as she works the room, and she looks up with a gentle smile, seemingly unaware of the reaction she's just caused. Ash is caught completely off guard, asking Kyle to wait as he suddenly stands up and calls her out directly. Ash looks up at him, looking pretty worried, but Kyle just smirks and tells her she's sleeping with him tonight. Ash tries to back out, stammering that she's just a servant and couldn't possibly do that, but Kyle grabs her and tells her to shut up. She has no right to refuse. He drags her off to his room, leaving the other girl at the table standing there in total silence as the door slams shut. Kyle throws Ash into the room and the poor girl is shaking with fear. Kyle starts stripping down, acting like it's nothing, and sits on the bed, thinking about how with his money and power, he can do whatever he wants. Kyle sits on the edge of the bed looking pretty pleased with himself, thinking that having this kind of power is the real proof of being the best. He looks down, his hair covering his face as he starts to smirk. Suddenly he just loses it, laughing like a total maniac while the sound of his voice fills the entire room. After a bit he calms down and sits there in silence, holding his head with his swords leaning against the wall nearby. He remembers a look from before sharp and focused back when Ash was worried about him, yelling about how his armor had gotten all dirty while they were out. She was so bright and happy then, telling him to leave all the support work to her so they could reach their dreams together. Kyle just smirks at the memory and says the guy was a complete idiot right up until the end, so he doesn't even need that old armor anymore. He tosses the gear onto the floor with a loud thud, telling himself he's going to get his hands on way more than just this. Kyle is still lost in his own head, thinking about how he's going to reach even bigger heights. He's got this crazy look in his eyes while promising himself he'll definitely claim that end of the dream for good. Meanwhile, out in a brick alley, Ash and Lucifer find themselves getting cornered by some other adventurers. The Mohawk leader from the Fire Sword Party recognizes her, asking if she's the supporter for that dual-wielding guy. He keeps talking, saying he heard they managed to climb all the way to near S rank in just 3 years. But Ash looks pretty nervous as she recognizes them back, asking if they're the Fire Sword group that just hit a rank. She tries to brush them off by saying they're in a hurry and tells Lucifer they should probably leave, but the guy won't let it go, telling her not to be so hostile since they aren't actually looking for a fight. He grabs her shoulder and asks why she's all by herself, wondering if she got separated from the rest of her party. Then he tries to pressure her into joining them, saying that she and the lady with her are both totally welcome. The Mohawk leader acts all friendly, saying adventurers should help each other, but Lucifer is clearly worried and doesn't buy it for a second. The guy just grins and says he was only kidding before he suddenly levels Luke with a massive punch to the face. It happens so fast that Lucifer can only scream out for him in shock. The hit is so brutal that Luke actually goes flying through the air, sliding across the ground as Jack and Anne start losing it. They're laughing about how far he flew and how their leader has no mercy at all. Ash just stands there in silence, her face hidden by her hood while the Mohawk leader looks down on them. He says he bets Luke got exiled from his party and that weaklings make him sick, telling the guy that trash like him belongs on the ground groveling. Down in the dirt, Luke just groans, trying to shake off the hit while a bruise starts forming on his face. Lucifer is shaking with rage, growling under her breath as she powers up, Telling the leader he's dead for touching Luke. Dark energy starts filling her hands while she stares them down with terrifying eyes, telling the group they aren't leaving the area alive. Ash is clearly freaked out by the sudden change in the air, and the Mohawk leader just looks confused, asking what's wrong with the woman, but Rona is totally panicked. Luke thinks to himself that her sin of fighting God was finally gone, but he realizes that if she kills someone now, she'll lose her chance at redemption. Lucifer is totally losing it, telling the guy she's going to make sure that he never opens his mouth ever again. She looks ready to snap, and Rona yells at her to stop, saying she's going to fall from grace again, desperately trying to hold her back. Luke yells out Lucifer's name as he reaches out to stop her, and she looks completely stunned, snapping out of her dark rage instantly. He tells her to just calm down, saying he really doesn't want her to commit another sin, standing right by her side. Lucifer looks at him with tears in her eyes, calling him Lord Luke while trying to explain that those people deserve it, but Luke just gives her a warm smile and says he'll be fine, gently getting her attention. He knows that if they let this go any further, there's no telling what might happen to her. So he takes her hand and tells her that she's already a precious comrade to him. Lucifer is totally caught off guard by his kindness, her eyes wide with surprise. She looks down and blushes, quietly apologizing for losing control like that. Luke lets out a big sigh of relief, telling her he's just glad she's okay now. Luke turns to Lucifer with a smile and asks if they should get moving. She just stands there, but then a hand reaches for a sword as someone asks where they think they're going. It's the Mohawk leader, and he's got his blade right against Luke's neck, looking pretty smug about it. Lucifer watches from the side, looking completely terrified as she sees the weapon drawn. The guy complains that he was planning on tormenting Luke a lot more, but Luke is being way too cold, so he tells Luke to stay and play with him a little longer, while he adds that once he's finished with Luke, he's going after that woman next. He leans in close with a nasty look, telling Luke he better do his best to keep him entertained, and then he mocks him one more time, calling him Mr. Laundry Boy right to his face. Luke doesn't say a word, he just looks down with a sharp, serious glare. Luke is looking down, but there's a small, sharp smile creeping onto his face as the Mohawk leader keeps the sword at his throat, telling Luke he better do his best to keep him entertained. He keeps throwing insults, calling Luke a damn laundry man while he stands there perfectly still. The guy says he was starting to get bored, but Luke cuts him off and asks what he just said, and the Mohawk leader stops for a second, looking a bit confused by how the vibe just changed. He doubles down though, asking if Luke didn't hear him and repeating that he's going to turn him into a toy. Then he looks past Luke and says the woman is going to be his next target after that, which finally pushes Luke to the edge. He says he doesn't care what happens to him personally, but as Lucifer watches on looking totally scared, Luke warns the guy about trying to lay a hand on her. He doesn't wait for a response, moving instantly to grab the guy by the head. Luke's look completely changes as he stares the guy down, telling him he's not going to show any mercy, but the Mohawk leader just laughs in his face, mocking the idea of Luke being a threat. He keeps chuckling while holding his position, clearly not taking any of this seriously yet. The guy loses it, telling Luke to stop making him laugh because he thinks the whole situation is a joke. He gets aggressive, asking what gives a weakling who got kicked out of his party the right to act so tough. Luke just stands there with a cold stare as the guy asks if he really thinks a loser like him can take them all on. Lucifer watches from behind, looking totally worried as she calls out his name, but Luke just tells her it's okay and orders her to take a step back. He faces off against the leader and his two armored thugs, reminding them he said he wasn't going to fight, only to let a dark smile crawl across his face as he starts to explain why. The mage Jack joins in on the trash talk, telling Luke that since he's just going to get wrecked anyway, the armored guy Alan tells him to just drop dead, calling him a laundry porter. Alan charges right in, yelling at Luke to get ready for a beating, but Luke moves like a blur, easily dodging the spear and shield bash as Alan hits nothing but air. Alan starts sweating, realizing way too late that the guy he's fighting is actually insanely fast. And before he can even react, Luke is already mid-flip, moving with total control. The armored guy just stares up in total shock, realizing he's completely lost track of where Luke is, but Luke is already right on top of him, coming down with his arms ready to strike. There's a loud crash as Luke's attack connects, hitting with enough force to slam Alan into the brick ground, pinning the big guy down like it's nothing. Alan is screaming his head off on the floor, clutching his arm while Luke stands over him. The mage, Jack, starts losing it, and asks what the hell Luke is doing as he charges up his magic. Jack looks totally desperate, yelling out water spear as he tries to blast Luke with a spell, but Luke isn't worried at all, thinking to himself that if it's just magic he's up against, then he has the perfect counter, shouting magic laundry while he reaches out and grabs the spell. The water magic just disappears into nothing, leaving Jack standing there with his hand in the air. He's shaking and can barely get a word out because he's so confused by what just happened. Luke doesn't give him any time to recover, locking onto his target and winding up a punch. He leans into it and connects a heavy hit right to the jaw, sending Jack's head snapping back. Jack lets out a final groan as his eyes roll back, completely knocked out before he even hits the dirt. Jack is slumped against the wall while Ash just stands there, and the Mohawk leader starts losing it. He raises his blade and screams at Luke not to screw with him, activating his fire sword skill. The guy lunges forward with everything he has, yelling at them not to get too cocky since Ash just reaches up and catches his arm midair, stopping the whole attack without moving an inch. He starts struggling to get free, calling Ash a piece of trash and demanding she let go. But he keeps ranting, asking if she actually thinks she can get away with defying him like this. Ash doesn't even blink, simply calling out her fireball wash skill as a magic circle appears. She reaches out and literally grabs the flames right off his sword, pulling the magic away. The fire disappears and the blade just snaps, with the tip of the sword crumbling into pieces. The leader stands there holding his broken weapon. He's totally shaken and has no idea what to do. The Mohawk leader stares at his broken weapon. He's sweating like crazy and panicking because his fire sword is completely gone. Jack holds onto his shoulder, looking totally shaken. He asks what's wrong with Luke and says this isn't anything like what he heard about the guy. Anne is crying and losing her cool too. She says she really thought Luke was just some useless guy who could only do laundry magic. But the two of them just give up and start running away in a total panic. Ash watches them go with a cold look, and Jack and Anne keep screaming as they bail. Jack yells that Luke is a total monster, leaving their leader all alone. The Mohawk leader watches his teammates disappear down the hall. He's desperate and yells out, asking them where the hell they think they're going. Ash doesn't let go of him though. She just looks him in the eye and tells him that his friends all left him behind. She gets right in his face, putting on the pressure. She asks him what he's planning to do now that he's by himself. Ash's expression turns dark and scary as she stares him down. She asks if he really wants to keep going with this fight. The leader just collapses onto the ground, shaking and making weird noises. He's so terrified he can't even get a real sentence out. The Mohawk leader completely loses it. He's crying and screaming while Ash stands over him, and just then Ash looks up and sees something that makes her face go totally blank from shock. Rona runs over and asks Lucifer if she's doing okay. Ash is just standing there confused, finally realizing that Rona is actually working with them. But Rona isn't focused on Ash. She yells out for Luke to be careful because she recognizes exactly who just showed up. There's a sudden rush of wind and energy that picks up, and a young girl in a white cloak appears out of nowhere, standing right in the middle of all the light. She's got these small horns and eyes that don't look human at all, just staring forward like it's nothing. Ash and Rona both spin around to face the new threat as the energy keeps building up, and they both look totally stressed out. They weren't expecting to run into someone like this here. Rona can't believe her eyes. She asks the girl why the hell she's even here. Ash just stands there with her eyes wide open, completely speechless as she watches Luke keep walking forward. Rona is freaking out in the back, yelling for him to stop because of how dangerous it is, but the horned girl is the one who looks surprised now. She just stares as Luke gets closer and he finally stops right in front of her. He tells Lucifer that everything is fine, and Luke leans down with a huge smile. He starts to say something, and the girl asks if he has something he wants to tell her. She gives a little smirk and says yes, then follows it up with a loud yes, sir. Before lunging forward and tackling Luke with a massive hug, she's got a giant grin on her face now. She yells out that she knew it, saying everything is exactly like what those two told her, while Rona just watches the whole thing with her jaw dropped. She can't believe what she's seeing, and Luke just stands there holding the girl up as she clings to his neck. The scary vibe from before is totally gone. Serafina stands there completely frozen in shock while the horned girl stays pinned on top of Luke, and Serafina's face turns bright red as she stammers out a "you," looking like she's about to blow a fuse. She finally snaps, yelling at the girl to get away from Luke right this second while asking what she thinks she's doing. The girl yells right back at her, asking Serafina what her problem is as she gets pulled away, while Serafina's hands are seen white-knuckled, death gripping the girl's white cloak to drag her off. The horned girl just gives a smug little giggle and calls Serafina a little angel, leaving Ash and Luke totally confused. Serafina gets even more heated, telling the girl she's being way too noisy and needs to move out of the way immediately. The girl refuses to budge, demanding to know why Serafina is even with her master, but Serafina just says it's none of her business. Rona joins in the panic, asking how the girl even knows Lucifer is an angel. Meanwhile, Serafina tries to warn Luke that this person is actually a dragon, while the girl just sits there with a big, fanged grin on her face. Ash just stands there with her mouth wide open, completely lost. It's like her brain just short-circuited, and she starts screaming while Serafina tries to take control of the situation, dragging the girl away and telling her to hurry up. Things settle into a really awkward standoff. Serafina looks totally annoyed while the girl pouts, leaving Ash caught right in the middle. Serafina gets right in the girl's face, asking what a dragon could possibly be plotting by trying to get so close to Luke. The girl doesn't back down for a second, telling Serafina the same thing applies to her since Luke is actually her master. She doubles down on it. She's been looking for him for a long time and tells the angel to just stay out of her business. Ash starts panicking and waving her hands around, begging both of them to just chill out before things get even worse. Once things settle a bit, Ash asks the girl why she said she found them. She was supposed to be the porter for that fire sword group. The girl just sighs like it's no big deal, saying that party of idiots isn't useful to her anymore. She figures they won't survive much longer anyway since they're too stupid to see how powerful her master really is. The horned girl catches Luke completely off guard, grabbing onto him and happily shouting that she came all this way to the dungeon just to find him. She then turns her attention to Serafina, acting surprised that Luke is hanging out with an angel who got kicked out of the heavens, which immediately gets under Serafina's skin. She fires right back, saying she never expected to run into someone like her in a place like this either. Serafina doesn't stop there. She identifies the girl as Ashley, a dragon who was actually exiled from the celestial dragon realm. Hearing her true identity and past called out like that makes Ashley's eyes go wide. She quickly recovers, realizing that her reputation is bigger than she thought since even an angel has heard of her. Serafina explains that the stories have spread everywhere, even through the heavens. And the word is that there's a heretic dragon out there who slaughtered her own kind just for killing a few humans. Ashley just stands there for a second, quietly repeating the word humans to herself like it's a joke, while she lets out a dry laugh, admitting that to the dragons she killed, they really were just mere humans. Ashley clenches her hands together tightly, saying that those people weren't just random humans to her, they were something more. Serafina just watches her with a confused look while Rona stands there totally stunned by what she's hearing. With a sad look on her face, Ashley starts to explain that the person who actually got killed was her one and only best friend, and just saying it out loud seems to hit her hard. Rona looks completely heartbroken and can barely even get Yumi's name out, while Serafina stays quiet as a memory flashes back to a massive fire that destroyed everything in sight, leaving a younger Ashley panicking and crying with her dragon eyes showing as she loses it. She's shown holding her friend's bloody body, begging her to just wake up and smile for her like she always used to do. Crying and holding her friend's face, she begs for an answer and screams Isabella's name into the air. But back in the present, Serafina finally connects the dots about Ashley's best friend, leaving Rona horrified that the girl was actually murdered. Serafina looks pretty skeptical about the whole thing, asking if a dragon like Ashley and a human could really be best friends. Ashley gives a sad little laugh and says it probably does sound crazy, especially since she's a dragon, the kind of monster the whole world is terrified of. She keeps going, saying that normally there is just no way for humans and dragons to ever understand each other at all. But that girl Isabella was just different. She was actually kind to Ashley, even though she knew what Ashley really was. Ashley just stares at the ground and bites her lip hard enough to draw blood, clearly losing it over the memory. Seeing the girl in so much pain makes Rona freeze up for a second, looking totally worried about her, so she decides to step in and reaches out her hand. Rona gently places her hand on the girl's face and uses her wound laundering skill to fix the damage, which works instantly. The cut on Ashley's lip vanishes and she's left looking completely healed as the magic fades. Ashley looks up with wide, grateful eyes and thanks her, calling her master, which totally throws Rona off and leaves her stammering. Ashley looks down and tells Rona how kind she is, but then she starts to clench her hand, asking if Rona really isn't afraid of her despite her being a dragon. Rona just gives her a gentle look and says she isn't scared at all. She explains that she can't just leave her behind when she's hurting so much, and tells Ashley that she really doesn't have to force a smile for her. The two of them stand in the quiet alley as Ashley sounds confused, claiming she isn't forcing anything. A few droplets hit the pavement while Rona starts to explain herself, pointing out that Ashley has actually been crying for quite a while now. Ashley looks totally shocked as the tears keep falling, finally realizing that she's actually breaking down. Rona watches her with a sad look, saying it must have been so hard for her to lose her best friend. She finishes by saying Ashley has probably been carrying all that pain alone this whole time. Ashley starts sobbing and making these choked-up sounds, her face showing how much she's actually struggling before Rona suddenly pulls her into a tight hug, catching the girl completely off guard as she finally breaks down. Ashley starts wailing and keeps calling out Isabella's name while clinging tightly to Rona. Rona tells her it's okay and mentions that she actually knows how it feels to lose someone really important. She looks at Ashley and asks if she'd be willing to talk about what actually happened to her. Ashley stays quiet for a second, looking like she's reliving some pretty dark memories. Back in the celestial dragon realm, people see her coming and start calling her the accursed child. A guy with a bandage around his head yells at her to get lost because she's gross. Little Ashley gets hit by something and just stands there with tears in her eyes, looking totally miserable. The guy yells that his dad and brother both died in the Great War, and Ashley walks away while people mock her, calling her an eyesore and laughing at her title. As she remembers how the Fire and Black Dragon tribes were stuck in a massive war long ago, she explains that the tribe leaders had her to finally bring peace, making her that symbol. But it didn't work out since the two groups still totally hated each other, leading to everyone fighting in secret even if there wasn't a full-blown war happening out in the open. Because she was a mix of both sides, she ended up being hated by pretty much everyone, and it got so bad that even her own parents started shunning her. She spent her whole life alone with people whispering behind her back until one day she hears the sound of someone crying out in the woods. Looking over, she finds a girl collapsed in the grass and crying her eyes out. Ashley leans in looking pretty worried and asks if the girl is okay. Isabella can only manage a few weak groans as she starts waking up. This girl turns out to be Isabella, and she looks completely out of it while trying to figure out what just happened. Isabella asks where she even is and who Ashley is. Meanwhile, it turns out this girl is actually going to be Ashley's future best friend. The thing is, the Celestial Dragon Realm is a place where no other race is ever allowed to go, and Ashley knows that if the other dragons find a human here, things will get ugly, so she explains that's why she had to act. Isabella gets this huge smile on her face and thanks Ashley for saving her life, which leads to her admitting she can't believe she's actually standing in the place where the dragons live. To her, being in this hidden world feels just like something out of a fairy tale. Ashley looks at her and mentions that it's actually her first time ever seeing a human too. She plays it off a bit cool, saying she only helped because she couldn't just leave someone hurt and alone. Isabella admits she doesn't really remember what went down, but she's just glad that Ashley was the one there to save her. And she grabs Ashley's hands with a huge grin, telling her to just look at how much it means to her, especially since she feels like she's made such a great friend. Ashley just freezes. She stands there staring with her eyes wide open while she tries to process it, eventually asking if they're really friends. Isabella starts panicking, asking if she said too much and saying sorry for jumping to conclusions, but Ashley just starts laughing a little bit, which leads to her asking what that's even about, honestly thinking the whole situation is pretty strange. Isabella looks on, clearly relieved to see Ashley taking it so well. Isabella leans in way too close to Ashley's face, shouting about how she finally smiled, which leaves Ashley a bit stunned while Isabella keeps going, saying she was actually worried since Ashley always looked so serious. She points to her own cheeks with a huge grin, telling her that a cheerful smile is definitely the best way to go. Isabella keeps the compliments coming, telling Ashley that she's way cuter whenever she's smiling like that. Ashley looks away all shy and thanks her, but that's when it hits her that Isabella was really her very first friend, and just like that, they started hanging out and playing together every single day. They spent their time doing normal stuff like making flower crowns and just laughing together in the woods. Those days were honestly the most fun she'd ever had, but someone was watching them from the shadows the whole time. Ashley really believed they would stay together forever, but then these creepy guys led by a blindfolded dude showed up, and suddenly everything goes wrong. Ashley screams out Isabella's name as the memory turns into a nightmare. Ashley shows up all happy to see her friend, asking Isabella what kind of games they should get into today. But then she snaps out of it and finds herself in a cold stone room, totally confused about where she is. In her memory, she's running through the woods calling out for Isabella, wondering where she could have gone, and she walks right into a crowd where a woman scolds her, saying she told her not to leave that spot. Everything goes quiet as we see Isabella's face. She looks completely terrified, like something horrible is happening. The dragonkin have her tied up with thick ropes right in the middle of the street while everyone just watches. That blindfolded guy starts yelling to the crowd, bragging about how they caught a human trespassing in their sacred realm. He keeps riling them up, asking his people if they can ever actually forgive someone for doing something like that. The crowd starts losing it. They're all shouting, asking how a human even managed to get into their land. One guy screams that the human broke into their territory and they definitely shouldn't let him leave the place alive. The crowd is getting violent now. Someone yells to kill him already while Ashley just stands there shaking with sweat dripping down her face. That blindfolded guy gets a creepy, sharp-toothed grin. He tells everyone she committed a huge sin, so he's got a plan for what comes next. He shouts that she's going to be executed right on the spot, and Ashley just stares back in total shock like she can't believe this is happening. In the memory, young Ashley comes running out of the crowd, screaming for them to wait and stop the execution before it's too late. The blindfolded guy just looks over and smiles. He says he was expecting her to show up eventually. Two guys jump her and slam her into the ground, pinning her down. Ashley starts crying and yells out, asking what they're doing to Isabella and trying to explain that Isabella is her best friend. But the leader just uses it against her, pointing her out to the whole crowd and announcing she's the one who was hiding the human. He keeps yelling, telling everyone that their supposed symbol of peace is actually a lawbreaker, and asks the angry mob if they can really let a dangerous person like her just walk away after what she did. The crowd is completely turning on them now, with people calling Ashley a cursed child, and others yelling about how crazy it was for anyone to even think about sheltering a human, the whole symbol of peace. Idea is being trashed, as people start calling him nothing but a jinx. One guy shouts out, asking what they're supposed to do if the peace is ruined because of him, and then the mood gets even darker as someone calls for them to kill that thing along with him. The chants start picking up speed, with everyone agreeing and screaming to just kill him already. It turns into a total frenzy. Voices are coming from everywhere, all of them demanding that they kill both of them. Young Ashley is losing it, screaming at the top of her lungs for them to stop and let Isabella go, but Isabella just looks at her, telling her softly not to blame herself for any of this. She turns her attention to the angry mob and says it's all her fault for trespassing on their land. Isabella continues her plea to the angry mob, begging them not to say anything bad about Ashley. Meanwhile, the villagers keep a tight grip on Ashley, who can barely even choke out her friend's name as she watches the scene unfold. Isabella looks back with a tearful smile and tells Ashley that being sad doesn't suit her. She says that Ashley looks so much better when she's happy, and asks her to just give one more smile before the blindfolded man suddenly steps forward and drives his darkened hand straight through her chest. Ashley's world stops as she stares in total shock. Blood splatters everywhere, and Isabella's body goes completely limp, falling backward as the light leaves her eyes. The body hits the cobblestones in the middle of the town square. The executioner just stands there over her, and Ashley is left shaking on the ground, unable to even make a sound. The crowd doesn't stop there though, as someone points out that Kyle is the next one on the list, and they order the men to bring him over right now. The memory of Isabella smiling and happy flashes through Ashley's mind, but it only makes the reality of what just happened hit 10 times harder. Ashley starts choking on her own sobs, completely losing control as she lets out a scream that doesn't even sound human anymore, revealing sharp fangs as a massive explosion of white light blasts outward, sending the villagers flying backward. The sheer force of her energy starts ripping the very ground apart, and inside that blinding light, her body begins to shift into a dark, monstrous form that completely takes over the square. A thick, dark aura spreads everywhere while a massive, scaly claw stomps down on the stones. A heavy voice growls out, asking how they could dare do something like that to Isabella. A giant dragon stands tall in the fire, and then the memory finally fades out. Back in the present, Luke and Rona stand with the young, horned girl by the brick wall. Young Ashley's eyes fill with tears as she remembers the nightmare, telling them how she suddenly found herself in a literal sea of fire. And in the middle of all that heat, the only ones left were her and Isabella in her monstrous form. She explains that the Dragon King ended up banishing her from the dragon realm for killing her own kind and trying to hide a human, so she finally made her way down to the human world. But things didn't go like she hoped. The people there just saw a freak, and they started screaming for someone to hurry up and kill the monster. Looking back at those faces makes her realize she had absolutely nowhere left to go, and she breaks down crying because there was just no place for her in the whole world, which leaves Serafina and Rona standing there in total silence, just taking in how much she suffered. But then Ashley mentions that things changed when she met a certain couple, a man with eyes as clear as the sky, standing there with his wife as they looked toward the future. Ashley remembers the woman standing there, looking like an angel with her beautiful silver hair. The sight of her leaves Ashley completely stunned. Her eyes wide as she just stares. Luke's father leans in to ask if she's okay, while his wife realizes right away that the kid is actually a girl. The man quickly apologizes for the mix-up, but then he gets serious and asks what happened to leave her in such bad shape. His wife agrees and gently tells Ashley to just stay still for a second. She reaches out and casts a healing spell, making Ashley flinch from the sudden flash of light. Luke's father laughs about how cute she is, wondering if she's a little dragon, while his wife finishes up and tells her the wounds are all gone. But they don't stop there. The guy asks if she's hungry, saying she looks like she hasn't had a real meal in a long time. Ashley just looks up at them in silence as the woman asks if she wants to come along with them, and for a girl who had completely given up on believing in anything, this moment changed everything. Luke's father carries Ashley on his shoulders as they walk together, with his wife following close behind. She gently pats the girl's head, and Ashley thinks about how the two of them stayed by her side with so much kindness. The scene moves to a town filled with old buildings and a big clock tower standing in the center. Inside a house, Ashley looks like she's about to cry and asks if they're already leaving, but the mother just says it's about that time. The woman looks at Ashley and asks if she can do her one favor, making the girl wonder what it is. Luke's father steps in and asks if she can help their son out when he eventually makes it to the city as an adventurer. Ashley just blinks in surprise, not expecting them to mention a son. The guy keeps talking, saying the kid is still small right now, but he's going to be an amazing adventurer one day. He looks at her and says he really wants her to support him when that time finally comes. Ashley thinks back to him saying he's counting on her, while in the present, she struggles to remember what their names were. Ashley finally remembers the names of the people who took her in, saying they were Maine and Luna Bonaparte, and that their only son was named Luke Bonaparte. The realization hits Luke so hard he starts crying right there as he hears his own name. A memory flashes back of the happy couple and a younger Ashley, showing just how close they all really were back. Then Ashley speaks softly, confirming one more time that their only son was indeed the boy standing right in front of her. Luke can't even hold it back anymore, his eyes welling up with tears as the weight of his family's past finally connects. He breaks down and leans into her, crying about how his father and mother were the ones who took care of her, while the guy just stares off, completely overwhelmed by the fact that his parents' kindness reached across all these years. Serafina watches him struggle and tells him not to push himself too hard while he's in this state. But she makes sure he knows she's staying right there by his side to support him through the heavy news. Ashley pulls him into a hug, saying she's been looking for him forever and that meeting him is exactly what his parents said it would be. Ashley leans into the hug, thinking about how her master isn't scared of her at all. He even holds her close like this. And Rona watches them with a sad smile, tears running down her face as she quietly agrees with how things turned out. Suddenly, Ashley perks up with a huge smile, saying she needs to go tell Mine and Luna that she finally found him. She asks where they are, but Luke looks down, his voice shaking as he tells her he's sorry. He explains that his mom and dad passed away during a dungeon expedition a while ago. Ashley just freezes, the look on her face showing she can't even process what she just heard. The reality starts to sink in, and she realizes that the two people who cared for her are really gone for good. Tears start streaming down her face again. She tells Luke she's so sorry for bringing up something so painful, while she starts spiraling into regret, wishing she had just gone along with them on that trip back then. She grips her chest tightly, crying about how she never even got the chance to say thank you to them. Luke reaches out and gently pats her head, telling her it's not her fault and thanking her for keeping their memory alive. Luke keeps his hand on Ashley's head, telling her that just like his parents always said, he'd be so happy if she could just stay by his side and keep supporting him from here on out. Ashley just stares up at him with tears welling in her eyes, so Luke asks if her silence means no. She immediately loses it and shouts that it's definitely not a no, lunging forward to hug him tightly while thinking about how everything has been so painful for such a long time. She really thought that after Isabella died, she was going to have to be alone for the rest of her life. But now she wants to stay to repay her debt to his parents and for the master who finally saved her. Looking back at her memories of his mom, she realizes that the person she's been searching for is right there in front of her. She thinks about how meeting Mine and Luna gave her a real ray of hope, and now she looks at Luke with a bright smile, promising to give him her everything as his loyal servant. With tears in her eyes and a massive smile, Ashley officially introduces herself, yelling out her name and declaring that she's just a weird dragon who has decided to dedicate her entire life to her master. Luke stands tall and introduces himself as Luke Bonaparte, proudly telling her he's the son of Mine and Luna, but the emotional atmosphere gets cut short when Serafina looks down, saying she gets the situation. She grabs Ashley by the back of her hair, asking how long she plans to keep clinging to Luke like that. Ashley gets pissed and tells her to read the room since they were clearly having a moment, though Serafina just argues back that she was polite enough to wait until the conversation was actually over. She doesn't let up and demands that Ashley get away from Luke this very instant, causing the two of them to start growling at each other until Luke tells them to shut up because he hears something. A massive heavy foot slams down onto the stone floor as a new threat finally shows up. The ground shakes as a massive impact hits right in front of the group, leaving Luke and the girls completely stunned as a giant horn starts to appear through the settling dust. And there it is, a massive Ranka-Gigant Minotaur screaming its head off right in their faces. Ashley totally loses it and screams about it being a giant pig, while Serafina just looks at it bored and calls it a cow, but the white-haired girl panics, saying it's the 35th floor boss. She pulls her weapon and tells everyone she actually fought this thing once when she was with Kyle, and it's mostly just a huge wall of muscle that doesn't move all that fast, though she warns Kyle to stay sharp, because the really tricky thing about a monster like this is how it uses that massive frame and those sharp horns to flatten anything in its path. The beast puts its head down and goes into a full charge, aiming to mow the whole party down. Rona sees the monster charging and panics, screaming Ashley's name as the girl's expression completely changes, her eyes narrowing with a look of serious focus. She crosses her arms and calls out her dragon armor skill. And suddenly this heavy black dragon claw starts growing right over her arm, while dark scales creep up her face and she flashes a scary, sharp-toothed grin. The massive minotaur slams into her with everything it's got, but Ashley just stops the beast's entire charge with one hand, looking back like she's actually confused by her own strength. Rona is totally losing it, though Serafina just watches while the monster stands in the rubble and Ashley hops back to catch her breath, staring at her hands and wondering what just happened. Ashley lets loose a massive blast of fire, yelling out her dragon flame skill as the heat completely incinerates the floor boss, leaving nothing but smoke and Rona standing there with her jaw dropped, unable to believe a floor boss was taken down that easily. Ashley looks at her hands, thinking about how strong a dragon actually is, then she hops over to Rona and asks if she saw that. Rona says it was amazing, but asks why Ashley looked so shocked when she blocked the monster earlier and Ashley just blinks. She says she expected the monster to go flying back when she hit it, but it just stopped right there. She wonders why, while Rona realizes that even a girl like this is still a terrifyingly strong monster. Rona looks at the smoke, wondering if Luke's magic actually weakened the boss before checking on Ashley to see if she's holding up alright after that fight. Ashley just brushes it off, saying she's fine because she's the strongest monster there is, and some random enemy isn't going to drop her, but right then, a massive shadow falls over the group as something huge starts breathing right behind them, showing off some massive tusks. Rona completely loses it when she looks up, unable to believe what is standing there. It's a rank A orc lord and Rona realizes there are more bosses left. Ashley just stares at it and calls it a huge cow, so Serafina points out it's a pig, while Rona tells them both to get serious. Ashley gives a confident smile and tells her master it's okay, asking for one more shot at the monster, but Lucifer steps in first, chanting her seraphim blazing light arrow spell as a massive explosion of white light fills the entire area, making it hard for Luke and Ashley to even keep their eyes open while the energy slams into the orc lord, piercing right through its chest and stomach like it was nothing. Lucifer holds up her hand and casually notes that she missed the vitals, but she's not worried. She says she couldn't let Ashley be the only one showing off. She looks directly over at Ashley, who is standing there with Rona, both of them completely stunned to see Lucifer jumping into the fight. Ashley starts complaining immediately, saying she was just about to do that and telling Lucifer not to steal her kill. Ashley keeps going, reminding everyone that she's the one who swore her total loyalty to Luke, and she's definitely not about to let Lucifer swoop in and take all the credit for the fight. She gets right in Lucifer's face and challenges her to a contest to see who can actually be more useful to their master. Lucifer just smiles and accepts, though she's already certain she's going to win. Rona starts panicking, waving her hands to try and get them to chill out for a second. She looks at them and says she has an idea, but the orc lord is still right there, wounded and screaming as it swings its giant axe through the air. Ashley doesn't look scared at all, she just watches the massive blade come crashing down toward her with enough force to level the ground. She decides to take the hit head-on, standing her ground with a confident smirk. Ashley sees her opening and jumps into action. She tells everyone she's going to hit him while his guard is down. She charges in with her eyes wide and screams out her Flame Wash Fireball Laundry spell, ready to slam the attack right into the monster's back. The Orc Lord is completely caught off guard, failing to block the hit. Rona steps up next, telling the group that if they can give her some long-range cover, she'll use her Circle of Light. The monster starts taking a beating from the energy, and before it can recover, magic chains wrap all the way around its chest. It roars out in frustration, but it's stuck. Ashley knows they've got it now. She says this makes things way easier and tells everyone to give it everything they've got. She yells out her wash laundry move at the top of her lungs, and a massive explosion of light just erases the monster from the room. The power behind it is so intense that when the smoke finally clears, there's nothing left but a small magic stone. Luke finally catches his breath after the battle, letting out a long sigh of relief as the adrenaline starts to fade. Lucifer smiles and tells him his movements were perfect, while Ashley just loses it, geeking out over how cool he looked. Luke gets all humble and starts waving his hands around, saying they've got it wrong because they're the ones with the real power. He knows he only won because they were right there fighting by his side. He looks at them both and gives them a sincere thank you, but the girls just laugh and tell him it's really no big deal. They're all acting friendly until the vibe suddenly gets weird. Both Ashley and Lucifer get these annoyed looks on their faces, and Ashley starts talking trash, saying Lucifer wasn't helpful and that weak angels should just stay out of it. Lucifer isn't having it and snaps back, saying she's the one who supports Luke and there's no room for anyone else. Luke has to jump in between them and yell for everyone to just stop fighting already. Luke, Lucifer, and Ashley finally take a second to breathe. Standing there together with huge smiles, Ashley looks more excited than ever. This was the first major win for the group, the start of the exiles. Luke just stares ahead with his eyes sparkling, feeling like they finally accomplished something real as Lucifer gives a gentle look. With this floor cleared, the group decides their next big target is Kataru. But elsewhere, a mysterious guy is just sitting back and smirking, totally aware of where they're staying. Meanwhile, Jack starts drifting into a memory. He hears his mother's voice telling him he's amazing and that since he has the magic, Zenith skill, he's definitely going to be a legendary mage one day. Jack wonders if he's just dreaming. In the memory, his younger self looks up at his mom and promises her that he's going to study as hard as he can. He keeps talking to her, saying that once he's all grown up, he's going to be right there by her side helping out with all her research. Jack's mind keeps drifting back to when he was just a little kid, remembering exactly who he used to be back then. It's a lot to take in until Anne snaps him out of it, telling him to wake up because they need to move. Jack sits up in bed looking a bit out of it, just nodding along as they get ready to leave Roa's Inn, located on the 28th floor of Catal. Downstairs, someone calls Jack out for being late. He just laughs and says his bad, explaining that the night was so nice he just totally overslept. Anne isn't having it though. She looks at them and asks where their armor is. Jack says there's no way he's wearing that, and Alan agrees it's too heavy, leaving their healer fed up, telling them they're sloppy and won't get any heals. Just as the group is about to head out, Rona stops Kyle to talk, looking pretty furious as she asks if he forced himself on her worker last night. Kyle just smirks and says the woman seemed like she was enjoying it, but Rona shuts that down fast, saying the girl was literally trying to kill herself. She mentions things would have ended badly if she hadn't found her in time. Kyle doesn't even care, just laughing and calling the girl a total fool, before adding that anyone should feel honored to be with him, making Rona clench her fists as she decides she's heard enough of his trash talk. She drops the hammer and tells Kyle he's officially banned from the inn, which only makes him laugh more, asking if she's sure about banning a future hero. Rona watches the group leave, smiling to herself as she says she wonders about that. Kyle isn't interested in talking anymore, yelling at his party that it's time to move out. As the group walks away, Rona stares at their backs and whispers Kyle's full name, leaving Alan to remind the rest of the team not to get too full of themselves or trust their power too much. The scene shifts deeper into the dungeon, where the party finally reaches the 25th floor. Some other adventurers nearby get hyped up when they see Kyle pull out two swords to dual wield. The fight kicks off immediately, with the group swinging wildly. Alan is already struggling, gasping for air and cursing about how things are going south. The monsters just won't stop coming, swarming the party from every side as they start to realize they're in trouble. Alan starts losing it and yells at Anne to heal him, but she's panicking because her mana is almost gone. Jack grunts in frustration and tries to force his magic out, calling for a fireball to blast the enemies, but he stops cold when he realizes his staff isn't working right. He starts sweating and panics, yelling out to no one about why this is even happening. While the mage is losing it, Kyle drops into a low stance and readies his dual blades, unleashing his twin sword barrage. He moves like a blur, cutting through the monsters and standing his ground as the bodies of the creatures he just shredded hit the floor. He's not happy though, turning around to scream at the rest of them to stop slacking, shouting that Jack has never once run out of mana in his entire life until right now. Anne tries to call out his name, but Jack just snaps back that he didn't choose for this to happen, while Alan loses his mind over how many monsters are still swarming them. Kyle is sweating hard, looking around at the absolute chaos. He says he's never seen this many monsters in one place and can't figure out what's going on, looking suspicious as he wonders if he had something to do with this, though he tries to tell himself that's just impossible. Suddenly, a random kid named Aki starts cheering, yelling about how the swordsmanship is incredible and exactly what he expected from the dual wielder. Kyle isn't in the mood for fans though. He snaps back and asks the kid who the hell he's supposed to be, but Aki just keeps going, saying there's a massive rumor among all the adventurers that the dual wielder hit S rank in record time. He tells Kyle that every single person here showed up just to see them in action. Kyle just stands there totally silent, taking it all in, until a dark smirk creeps across his face. He lets out a quiet breath and says he finally sees what's happening. Kyle stands there with a creepy grin, having just sliced the kid's head off. Someone nearby screams out Aki's name as the kid's head falls through the air with his eyes wide open and empty. The head hits the stone floor with a thud, leaving Kyle standing over the body with his sword out like it was nothing. The man tries to call out Kyle's name but stops, totally frozen. The woman next to him can barely even whisper his name as they watch the horror unfold. Chaos breaks out instantly with people screaming and running for their lives. One guy tries to yell at Kyle, demanding to know what he's doing. But Kyle doesn't stop, He just leans in with this creepy smirk on his face, moving like a shadow past the panicking crowd. He draws his blades in a flash and slices right through an adventurer's back, killing him before he even realizes what's happening. People are dropping and screaming in every direction, while Kyle just walks through the middle of the bloodbath like it's nothing. The man from his old group loses it, screaming at Kyle and asking him what the hell is wrong with him. Kyle just keeps moving, stepping over the mess as he calmly says he finally figured everything out, and he knows exactly why things went south. He looks down at the ground, muttering that none of this would have ever happened if it had just stayed the four of them. He stares at the bodies with total disgust, saying the whole situation is actually the fault of all these pieces of trash. His old party just stands there in shock while Kyle explains that these people swarm together, and they're the ones who lured in the massive monster horde. Kyle looks completely gone, just staring ahead and saying that absolutely nothing is going to stand in his way anymore. The white-haired girl can only stutter his name in shock while Alan starts to snap. He's convinced everything that happened is these people's fault. Alan loses his temper completely, screaming that these guys have some nerve for putting his group through all that trouble. He grabs one of the guys by the throat, ignoring him as he tries to beg for his life and claims he didn't do anything wrong. Alan tells the guy to shut up and quit messing around before he levels him, leaving the man screaming on the ground. The whole area turns into a panic as people realize how dangerous these guys actually are and start yelling for everyone to run. One man tries to crawl away, crying out for someone to help him and make them stop, but it's too late. Kyle just stands there, his face is covered in blood and he looks like he doesn't feel anything at all. The ground is littered with people who didn't get away. Alan and Kyle just stand over the mess they made. Anne looks on with a terrified face, nervously asking the two of them if they haven't gone a little too far with the violence. Anne tries to take the edge off the situation, looking pretty shaken as she hands over a water canteen. She tells the guys to just have a drink and try to calm down for a second. She ends up being so stressed that she starts chugging the water herself, looking like she's about to lose it. The pressure of everything going on is clearly getting to her. But then she stops mid-drink and just stares at the canteen with this totally confused look. Something feels off, and she can't quite figure out what it is yet. While she's distracted, Alan turns around and barks at the porter. He's still on edge, demanding she hurry up and at least get them some damn drinks to go around. He keeps the insults flying, calling Ash a completely useless pack mule while she scrambles in the background. It's clear he has zero respect for her role in the group. Ash quickly apologizes to Alan and Jack, sounding totally intimidated as she promises to get everything ready. She starts pouring the water immediately to avoid making them angrier. Anne lets out a huge sigh of relief, saying she finally feels alive again after the drink. Alan joins in with a laugh, shouting that nothing beats dungeon water. Wait, Anne starts getting worried again, asking what's going on. She mentions that the water is supposed to blow their fatigue away, but it's not doing anything, and Kyle doesn't even give her a chance to finish. He just steps up and snatches the canteen right out of her hands without saying a single word. He just tilts his head back and starts chugging the rest of the water himself, looking totally cold and disconnected from everyone else standing there. Ash just stares blankly as the reality of the situation starts to sink in. She starts wondering if everything that's happened was really because of Luke, and just like that, a massive swarm of monsters comes out of nowhere. Alan is completely caught off guard, breaking into a sweat as they get surrounded, and he starts losing his cool, yelling out to no one in particular about how many of these things are actually left. The pressure is clearly getting to him while he tries to make sense of it, mentioning he thought they'd already cleared out the other adventurers. But more of those eyeless freaks just keep crawling out of the dark. Anne finally hits her breaking point and drops to her knees, asking how everything turned into such a disaster. She's terrified that her magic was actually tied to the water Luke provided. The number of monsters is just insane, but Ash is starting to see the truth. She realizes this isn't just bad luck or the other adventurers' fault, because the realization hits her like a ton of bricks. It wasn't their own strength at all. It was actually Luke's power carrying the entire group this whole time. Anne is basically hyperventilating at this point, screaming at the top of her lungs that they need to get the hell out of there before it's too late. She's completely convinced that they're all going to get wiped out right here, but as she's losing her mind, she notices Kyle standing right there in front of her. He's got his swords on his back and looks totally unbothered by the horde of monsters closing in. Kyle just stands there with this sharp smirk on his face, looking like he knows something the others don't. He's laughing to himself while he reaches back to draw his sword. He's totally calm despite the chaos, and Jack is absolutely losing it. He's sweating bullets and asks Kyle what the hell he's even planning to do. Kyle doesn't even flinch, just tells Jack that he should already know what the deal is. He starts walking forward, explaining that if they don't start saving every bit of stamina they have, they're never making it out alive. He looks back at Jack with these cold, scary eyes and tells him to just stay put right where he is. Jack is stunned and yells out, asking Kyle what he's even saying. He starts freaking out, screaming about how strong he actually is and that once his mana finally comes back, these monsters are history. He looks over at Alan and Anne, begging them to back him up and agree with him, but Kyle's eyes just narrow. He's completely locked in and ready to handle business himself. Jack lets out a high-pitched scream, completely terrified as the pressure of the situation finally breaks him. While everyone else is frozen in place, Kyle just draws his sword and starts walking forward. He's got Jack losing his mind in the back, stammering about how this has to be a joke and telling them not to mess around. The stress triggers a memory from years ago. A voice calls out asking what's happening in the middle of a quiet library. A young Jack stands there in total shock as he's told that his mother, a researcher named Korora, was just caught in a massive accident during a magic experiment. She's in critical condition and hasn't woken up. He rushes to her side, crying out for her to wake up while a doctor watches over them. But the news only gets worse. The man tells young Jack that keeping her alive with medical treatments is going to cost a crazy amount of money. Everything goes quiet in the hospital room, with just some flowers sitting on a table nearby as Jack looks at his mother's still face, remembering how his only dream was to help her with her research one day. Watching his mother lie there so still makes Jack realize something. He finally makes up his mind and grabs her hand, telling her he's decided to become an adventurer. He's convinced that if he can just reach the legendary place called the End of Dreams, everything will change. He knows that by becoming a top-tier adventurer, he'll be able to make more than enough money. Tears start streaming down his face as he promises her he'll find a cure no matter what it takes, but the memory snaps back to the terrifying present. Jack loses it, screaming that he absolutely can't afford to die here. He begs Kyle to stop, saying he'll do literally anything if Kyle just takes him back, even trying to use the fact that they're comrades to save himself. Kyle just gives him this creepy, cold smile and agrees, telling Jack that if they're really comrades then he should just die for him. Jack starts backing away in total panic, sobbing and begging for someone to help as he screams out Luke's name for help. But no one comes. Jack just stands there in shock as he gets taken out. Jack lets out a loud, painful scream as he gets hit. It's pretty clear things have gone south and he collapses on the floor, clutching his bleeding arm while staring up at Kyle in total disbelief. Kyle starts putting on this fake act, shouting over to Anne to ask what she's even doing, then yells for her to hurry up and heal Jack, but he's obviously just playing around with him. Kyle's face twists into a dark, creepy smile as he quietly laughs Jack's name to himself. Looking back with a nasty grin, Kyle tells Jack he'll be sure to tell everyone how brave he was, basically leaving him for dead. Jack reaches out a hand, crying and begging for Alan and Anne to wait. He's desperate, screaming for them to take him with them as they turn their backs on him. Alan and Anne both mumble that they're sorry, but they keep walking and leave Jack alone on the floor. The monsters move in right behind him. Jack just keeps crying out for them to wait as it all ends. The scene starts with a long, piercing scream that fills the entire area and cuts over to the 28th floor where Luke's party is currently moving through. One of the girls tells the other two they've finally made it to the City of Adventurers. And as they look up at the massive stone buildings, she says the city is called Catter. The streets are pretty busy with people walking around under the night sky. Inside a nearby building, some weapons and gear are just sitting against a wall, and someone starts pouring a dark drink into a teacup until it's almost full. A hand with sharp black claws flexes. The person realizes how much power they have. The dark-haired woman laughs to herself and says she's finally going to have some fun. Looking at the group, someone wonders if those two are actually just really close friends. It's a pretty wild sight, an entire town built right inside a dungeon floor. And as they walk through, Ashley mentions it's a total mystery since she can't sense any monsters around. Ashley teases Lucifer for getting so hyped up, asking if he's really that clueless about how this place works. She breaks it down for the group, explaining that this place is Catter, the legendary town for adventurers. The whole city was actually built by adventurers themselves to help conquer Noah's giant labyrinth. So everyone living here is a pro. Ashley points out that this specific floor is what people call a spot, a safe zone where monsters never spawn. Rona is honestly impressed and tells Ashley she really knows her stuff, making the girl brag about how Mine and Luna taught her everything. She asks her master if she's amazing, which just makes Serafina snap. She calls Ashley a fool and complains about how she's always clinging to Lord Luke. Ashley just yells back that she and her master are best friends, and there's zero room for a clumsy angel. The argument gets heated. Serafina yells that she's the one with absolute loyalty to Lord Luke, and tells Ashley to know her place since she's just a little dragon. Ashley doesn't take that sitting down. She snaps back at the angel, calling her water and making it clear she's officially crossed a line. Watching the two of them go at it again, Rona just stands there with a nervous smile. She tries to step in and tell them both to just pipe down. But Ashley's had enough. She looks over at Rona's confused face and declares that they should just let their master decide who he likes more. She immediately grabs onto Luke's arm with a huge grin, asking him straight up if he feels closer to her than he does to Lucifer. Serafina panics and jumps in too, looking totally desperate, as she asks him if their bond is actually the one that's deeper. The two of them start tugging on his clothes from both sides, one calling him master and the other calling him Lord Luke, as they refuse to let go. Serafina gets right in his face, demanding he pick who's more important to him, her or the dragon girl. Ashley doubles down with the most pleading look she can manage, asking him to finally say if she's more important to him than Lucifer is. Luke just stands there completely stuck. He starts stumbling over his words while the whole town stops to watch the chaotic scene unfold. Luke watches the girls bickering and can't help but let out a little laugh. It's like he finds the whole situation actually funny. He starts laughing out loud and tells Ashley and Serafina that they're honestly such good friends, which completely catches them off guard. He says he's even a bit jealous of their bond, leaving both girls standing there in total silence. They just don't know how to react. Luke looks back at them with a kind smile and says that Lucifer and Ashley are both incredibly precious to him and explains that they're both irreplaceable companions. He makes it clear he could never rank one above the other, so he tells them they shouldn't be fighting over things like that. He waves them over and says it's time to go, heading off, leaving the two of them scrambling to catch up. Serafina begs him to wait while Ashley shouts that she's coming too, and they both go running after him. The scene shifts to later that night at the inn. It's quiet outside, and the snow is lightly falling over the building as Luke walks up to a room. He slides the door open and politely lets himself in, saying he's sorry for the intrusion, but it looks like he caught Rona by surprise. She turns around with a shocked look on her face, definitely wasn't expecting to see him. Rona stands there in total shock, barely able to believe her eyes as she gasps out Luke's name, but he just gives her a huge, happy smile and tells her it's been a long time. Rona doesn't even hesitate. She moves so fast her hair flies back while she throws her arms around Luke, pulling him into a tight hug. She starts tearing up right there, telling him she's just so relieved that he's safe and sound. Luke just smiles and says her name, clearly happy to see her too. Rona looks a bit nervous then, mentioning how she tried to just stay quiet and watch from the side, but Serafina isn't having any of it. She starts yelling at Rona to get away from Lord Luke, calling her a vixen. Ashley joins right in, looking totally pissed while she tells Rona she's being way too familiar with her master, so Luke has to step in and stop them. He tells the girls to knock it off, explaining that Rona is the innkeeper and is basically like a big sister to him. Luke has to get onto Ashley and Lucifer again, telling them he already said not to be so rude to people. But Rona is just standing there sweating, completely blown away by the insane amount of power she feels coming off them. She can tell right away that Ashley is a dragonkin, and it's pretty obvious to her that Lucifer isn't human either, making her realize she needs to show some respect. She immediately bows her head and offers a sincere apology for being so rude, then introduces herself properly, explaining she's a former adventurer who used to run with a party called the Beast Rogue Yumi. Still curious about the company Luke is keeping, Rona looks up and asks him who these two girls really are, so Luke gives her a big smile and introduces them as Lucifer and Ashley, mentioning that they actually saved his life in the dungeon. Rona's expression softens as she realizes they're heroes, and she tells them they must be really important people to Luke, which catches both girls totally off guard. They just stand there with wide eyes, looking a little flustered by the compliment until Ashley stammers out a shy response, while Lucifer tries to act all tough, admitting that Rona seems like a pretty reasonable foxskin. Rona looks at Luke with a huge sense of relief, telling him she is just so glad he made it back safely after everything. But then she drops some big news, mentioning that the Twin Blades party actually stopped by the shop not too long ago. Luke looks completely floored, realizing that Kyle and his old crew were right there. He starts sweating a bit, figuring they must have just missed each other by a few minutes, and Rona admits she was honestly terrified for him because he wasn't with the rest of the group when they showed up. Luke tells her he's sorry for the scare but promises he's doing okay, while Ashley just stands back looking a little lost. Rona decides to move past the heavy stuff, telling the whole group they should take it easy and relax since they traveled so far, and she offers to head off and start getting their rooms and a good meal ready for everyone. Luke smiles and tells her they'll definitely take her up on that, thanking her for being so welcoming to them. And then, he asks if it's possible to trade in the magic stones he collected for some actual cash while they're there. Luke turns to Ashley and asks if she's holding up all right after carrying their heavy bags all day, but she just beams and says she's fine. Ashley starts bragging about how she's actually super strong, even offering to lift Luke up with just one hand to prove it, and Luke immediately turns her down, looking pretty stressed at the thought of being tossed around like a toy. Changing the subject, Rona asks if they're sure it was okay to just walk off with all the Fire Sword party's luggage, but Ashley doesn't feel bad at all, reminding everyone that those guys were the ones who ditched her to go off on their own. Lucifer chimes in too, saying it's their own fault for being dumb enough to challenge someone as great as Luke, and Ashley just nods along with a smile, saying the jerks definitely got exactly what was coming to them. Back in the dungeon, the leader of the Fire Sword party is having a total meltdown, sweating and completely terrified. He's clutching his head and screaming at his teammates, asking what they're even supposed to do in a spot like this. It finally hits them that they've got no gear and no bags, and they have absolutely no clue where they even ended up, while a huge pile of dark magic stones just sits there on the ground nearby, shining in the middle of the empty room. Rona looks completely shocked as she asks if Luke was really the one who did all of this. Luke just laughs it off and tries to be humble, telling her that it was actually all thanks to Lucifer and Ashley, but Lucifer isn't having it and shuts that down immediately, saying the credit belongs entirely to Luke's own power. Ashley jumps in to back her up, excitedly shouting about how her master is actually super strong. Rona just gives a knowing smile and says she sees how it is, looking like everything finally clicked for her. She thinks to herself that it makes total sense now. He really is the son of those two famous adventurers, which leads to her offering to take all the gear and luggage off their hands for a bit. She leads the group further into the inn, telling them to follow her while she sets out a massive plate of meat. Lucifer takes a bite and is basically in heaven, realizing this is what human food tastes like and calling it wonderful. Watching her enjoy the meal, Luke realizes this is actually the very first time Lucifer has ever eaten human food. Lucifer takes another sip of wine and admits she can't believe how amazing it is. Meanwhile, Ashley is busy stuffing her face with skewers and yelling about how good the meat tastes. Luke just watches them with a big smile, saying he's really happy to hear they're both enjoying the food so much. Lucifer gets a bit of a glow on her face as she mentions that the alcohol is actually the best part, and she starts pouring more, telling Luke he needs to keep up and drink plenty more with her. Luke tries to be a good sport, but he notices she's getting pretty tipsy and tells her she should probably stop. Instead of listening, she suddenly grabs his face and pulls him in way too close. Luke starts sweating and gets totally flustered, barely being able to get her name out while she just looks at him with those blurry, drunk eyes and giggles his name. Before he can even react, everything goes sideways and Luke lets out a shout as he gets knocked over. Ashley starts freaking out and tells Lucifer she's definitely had way too much to drink, but then she completely flips and says it's actually not fair, because now she wants some wine too. She dives right into the pile, making Luke yell at her to not start acting up as well, but right then the door slides open and Rona pops her head in to say the room is all set. Everyone freezes in place, with the girls looking caught while Luke is stuck on the floor. Rona just gives them this mischievous look and asks with a little giggle if she was interrupting. Luke can only manage to say her name while he sits there totally embarrassed by the whole scene. Moving on, things finally quiet down in the hallway after the long night of drinking. Luke gets the girls tucked in and thanks Rona for helping carry them, but she just says it's fine. He stands there for a second, just thinking about how crazy it is to be surrounded by such cute girls. Rona can't stop giggling and tells Luke he's a total player, making him beg her to stop teasing him while he starts getting his gear ready. Rona asks if he's going somewhere, and he says he's just hitting the store. She asks if she should wake the girls, but Luke says to let them sleep. He gives her a soft smile and tells Rona he really just wants her to rest. Rona takes that in and tells him he better not overdo things himself, but Luke just thanks her for the concern and promises he'll be totally fine. He stands there looking more confident than ever about what's coming next. Luke closes his eyes for a second to really lock in his focus. He flashes a huge grin and says he's doing all of this for his dream. Luke looks fired up and tells Rona he's finally decided to make his dream a reality with his own two hands. His eyes take on a sharp, dragon-like look for just a split second. Rona notices those earnest, unwavering eyes and thinks about how much he looks like his father. She gives him a head pat and wishes him luck, while Luke promises he'll always be there for her too. Luke thanks her and heads out the door, calling back that he's officially off. Watching him run down the hall, Rona can't help but think about how much he's grown. She feels like he might finally be strong enough to hear the truth she's been hiding. Her mind wanders back to her old days as an adventurer with her former crew. Memories of her old teammate Laura yelling for everyone to hurry up start flooding back. She reflects on that legendary S-rank party and her old life as the woman known as the Demon Princess. The story shifts to what are described as the final moments spent with Luna. Ashley goes over their supplies and realizes they have most of what they need, except for weapons and armor. She looks over at Luna decked out in heavy gear and Serafina looking ready as ever, figuring those two are already set. While walking through the city, Ashley stops when she notices a weird building covered in vines. She can't help but look at it, wondering what kind of shop would even be in a place like that. She decides to check it out, and the floorboards creak under her boot as she steps inside. The inside of the shop is dim and full of old equipment, making Ashley feel a little uneasy. Suddenly, a voice comes out of the dark, remarking on how rare it is to get a customer. A woman with a sharp smile welcomes her in, telling Ashley that their meeting must be fate. She stands there looking pretty confident and acts like she's been waiting for someone like Ashley to show up. The mysterious shopkeeper gives a knowing look and tells Ashley she should stay and relax. She welcomes her in again, acting like their meeting was written in the stars or something. The woman tells her to just make herself at home, leaving Ashley standing there feeling pretty out of place in this shop that's completely buried under vines and leaves. Ashley asks if it's cool if she just looks around for a bit, and the shopkeeper tells her to go for it and pick up whatever looks good. So Ashley thanks her and starts looking through the shelves, thinking that everything in here just looks really old and worn out. She starts wondering if this is actually just an antique shop rather than a gear store. But suddenly her eyes go wide when she sees something that actually looks interesting standing right. There is a full set of polished black armor that looks way better than the rest of the junk. Ashley stops in front of a dark set of gear, wondering if it's actually armor. She looks closer at the chest piece, noting that she's never seen an engraving like that before. She reaches out to touch it, asking the woman if it's for sale, but the second her hand hits the metal, her eyes go wide. The shopkeeper smiles, asking if she's actually doing okay after touching it. Ashley freaks out and starts apologizing, asking if she just touched something way too expensive to be messing with. The woman says it's not about the money, but that a normal person would have passed out the second they felt it. Ashley just stands there shaking while the shopkeeper gives a creepy smile. The shopkeeper stares at Ashley with that creepy smirk, telling her that she's actually pretty interesting. She keeps going, pointing out how it really looks like the armor has taken a liking to her, which just leaves Ashley standing there totally quiet. The woman then turns the question around and asks how she feels. Ashley can't figure out this weird feeling, but she can swear she hears a voice coming from the metal, calling out to her. She finally speaks up to break the silence, catching the shopkeeper a bit off guard for a second. Ashley looks right at the gear and says she's going to take it, then asks what the price is. The shopkeeper just lets out this slow, dark grin that looks like she's got a hidden plan. She tells Ashley that she doesn't even want any money for it, which makes Ashley freak out and try to argue. But the woman stops her, saying that instead of payment, there's just one thing she wants in exchange. She leans in with a heavy look and simply asks if Ashley will come back to see her again. The shopkeeper stares with a sharp look, telling them she's been waiting a long time for this, and Ashley just stands there totally speechless while the woman promises she'll be waiting for the next visit. Luke touches his face and says he gets it, accepting the weird terms of the deal. That sets Ashley off. She breaks into a huge smile and promises she'll definitely come back. The shopkeeper just watches them, looking like she knows something they don't as they start to head out. She asks for his name, so he tells her it's Luke Bonaparte. She smiles and says it's a good name, promising that she's going to remember it. The woman waves them off with one last goodbye, telling Luke she'll see him later, which makes Ashley shout out a final thanks as she starts heading for the door. She walks out into the busy street, finally leaving the shop behind for the night. The shopkeeper smiles and waves as it hits her. She realizes she's definitely seen Luke before and snaps her fingers like she just figured out a puzzle she's been working on. She mentions how fate is a funny thing, saying this whole meeting wasn't just some random coincidence. So she repeats his name, Luke Bonaparte, letting it sink in with a knowing grin. As he walks off, she tells him she's really looking forward to the next time they cross paths. The scene shifts over to Noah City, where things are starting to get pretty loud, especially at the local Adventurers Guild, where everyone is buzzing about some big news. A huge guy stands up and tells everyone the Twin Blades party has finally made it back. But that's not all. He says they're actually showing up to officially grab their S-rank certification. One guy asks if that's the same group the laundry porter used to be in, and his buddy remembers the silver-haired kid.